Did she say what kind of animal it was that attacked her?
So yeah, they're saying it's some type of animal attack. Statistically, there's been more animal attacks, mysterious deaths, people gone missing.
In other news, local authorities remain perplexed by the animal attacks.
What attacked you in the woods?
An animal. What else could it have been?
Welcome to It Was an Animal Attack, the home of the supernatural drama series. I'm Sandile.
And I'm Fadzai.
Friends of the pod, we have returned. You probably didn't know we were gone, but we were gone for a solid bit there. But because we're consummate professionals, you had an episode every 2 weeks, as promised. But we're back, we're better than ever, and we're ready to kick back into the show. And who else to return on but with with lancing energy, with uproarious excitement, Enzo St. John.
Yay! Pause for applause.
I'm not gonna lie, for a while there I was dreading this episode. In a very similar fashion to one Damon Salvatore, for whom I was also in the pilot seat, I foresaw some frustration. I foresaw some heatedness. I am actually excited for today.
Oh, wow. Okay, I'm happy
started.
because if I can be honest, I am so glad that I am not leading this episode.
Listen, I made the masochistic choice to drive this episode, but then a strange thing happened as I was doing the preparation of like, oh, this character's insane. We're gonna be in more Siren territory than we're gonna be in Damon territory, and that is something I will gladly take to the bank. But before we get started, in the kilobyte about Nadia Petrova, we spoke about the Vampire Diaries books, then the fact that they were still ongoing, being ghostwritten by an author that was hired by, it's called Alloy Entertainment. I looked it up, the company that made the Vampire Diaries books back in the 90s, and in fact are behind the production of the Vampire Diaries show as well. So that was interesting to find out. So you, Fadzai, because we were talking about the fact that L.J. Smith's name still appears, but the books are being ghostwritten. And you said, and I quote, maybe one day L.J. Smith will come out with, quote, The Vampire Diaries Book 4, parentheses, L.J. Smith's version. And I'm here to say, she kind of did.
Oh, really?
So,
when did this happen?
So, this is going to be very inside baseball for people who don't care about the books, but, you know, just bear with us for a couple minutes. So, L.J. Smith wrote 2 trilogies. One was written in the 90s. That's the first one. That's the one with the struggle, the awakening, like that whole situation. Then there was a decade hiatus after the 90s because of some family and health matters. And then the second trilogy came just as the TV show was coming out. So this was around like 2009 to 2011. In 2011, she was then quite unceremoniously shuffled off the third trilogy by the company because of, we'll say, creative differences. And that's when they brought on a ghostwriter. Apparently, in 2014, she released her intended work for that third trilogy as fan fiction on this site called Kindle Words. And if you don't know what Kindle Words is, it was this Amazon online publisher thing. The MO of them essentially was they license a bunch of popular stories and then they make a commercial venue for fan fiction of them. So people can write fan fiction about these licensed properties and then sell that fan fiction on this site, which, of course, was controversial in the world of fan fiction because one of the core tenets of fan fiction is it's supposed to be free. There's actually a big conversation going on about that now because of people. I think recently people tried to package and sell fan fiction as an original story, which is a whole like legal ramification. But this was licensed. This was licensed by the company. And one of these licensed properties was the Vampire Diaries. So L.J. Smith released her like L.J. Smith's version as fan fiction of the franchise on this platform. She released the first book, and I believe part 1 of the second book, and then after that, nothing was released. I believe this was because she had a huge health scare in 2015. I don't think she's really written anything since then. And then also, the site Kindle Words was then shut down in 2018. So, that's the tea on that.
I see. So, I guess cliffhanger.
I guess. I don't know if I want to super get into what those creative differences were because they won't make for productive conversation. But listener, you can go ahead and look that up if you want. Again, if you even care about the books. But yeah, does that make you, Fadzai, more inclined to go read them? Or
I'm definitely going to go read them. I'm going to try and find this cliffhanger thing. As you and I have discussed recently, in fact, many things that have been near and dear to me have been unceremoniously halted in the middle of their stories.
I just saw today you quote the announcement about How I Met Your Father being cancelled, having won 4 Emmys, and I was like, rough weekend for for House Fadzai.
I'm like, and similarly, it was either the beginning of this week or sometime last week that it was announced that Netflix had cancelled the Dead Boy Detectives, or whatever it's called. Something that
I didn't watch that. I could have told you that from before.
It looked interesting when when the trailers were dropping, and I didn't watch it because I was like, no, Netflix.
Yeah.
No. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me 18 times. Because quite frankly, I was like, I know what Netflix will do. You'll give me 2 seasons to fall in love with something, and those 2 seasons will come out over a span of like 4.5 years.
Right.
And then suddenly you'll cancel. And I'm getting old. I don't have time for this nonsense
There
anymore.
simply is not enough time. There isn't.
I also learned that the animated series Arcane, based on League of Legends,
2nd season.
which I think the first season dropped in like 2021, season 2 is coming out soon. It will be the final season.
Oh.
So
I didn't realize it had been announced as the final. Oh no.
I saw that
show
the other
was so
day.
well received.
You know, you make us wait 3 years only to tell us this is the end.
I remember that show being so well received by the general public and thinking, wow, who would have thought a show based on League of Legends was going to be such a huge juggernaut hit? 2 seasons? Wild.
So, you know.
I tell you, the state of television. This is
I'm
why.
starting to think maybe I should just for my own peace of mind, get into really popular mainstream anime, because then I'll have like 3,000 episodes.
There are plenty of other problems with that side of the business, I'll tell you, as someone who occasionally shops there. I'll also tell you the older ones are the ones where you'll find thousands of episodes. The more recent anime are much shorter. You think about JJK is probably the most popular one going on right now. 20 episodes a season, maybe a little bit more, which I prefer. I'm not in the business of 1,000 episodes. But in terms of TV shows, I think that's why we're finding a lot of comfort in shows like the Vampire Diaries and all shows who have like established long-running seasons, 22 episodes. Like, there is a certainty, despite differing opinions on the quality, there is a certainty that you will watch a show and you will finish it and the story will be done. So
That's that was the other side of my complaint. I was like, I either my TV shows either die good shows or they live long enough to become bad shows.
And speaking of which, a character dropping in right as a show was starting to turn. Enzo St. John. But if we're going to talk about Enzo, we need to start at the beginning of the season, even though that's not where he shows up. Season 5, I've said, worst season of the show. Fadzai said second worst season in his opinion, so not too far apart. We're going to talk about something called Augustine. So in episode 1, Elena Gilbert, our lovely main character, and Caroline Forbes, one of her best friends. Her other best friend's dead, so don't worry about her. They are starting.
They don't know she's dead.
It's true. They have not figured that out after 3 months.
Elena's brother is catfishing them on Bonnie's behalf.
Identity theft fraud. He should be in jail. They are starting out at Whitmore College. It's the college year. And that includes an unexpected roommate that they get when they move into their dorms, named Megan, our icon and legend, Hayley Kiyoko.
Determinate.
Miss Determinate herself. She's back in business. We love to see her. When they go to a party that evening at Whitmore House, the two of them are unable to get in because they haven't been invited into the building. They later get a call from Megan, who's inside the building, and she's in some kind of trouble. While they're trying to get information out of her, she then comes flying out a window, hits the ground, dead. And when Elena inspects her, she determines that a vampire killed her. Diane Freeman, who is the head of campus security, speaks to them, and she says, it was a suicide. We found a note from Megan, so, this is all closed up, but we can't find her phone. Anyway, suspicion central all around. Over the first, 5 episodes of the season, in addition to this, we also spend some time with a Dr. Wes Maxfield. He keeps popping up now. I actually find a little comfort in seeing his name. Not a very exciting character, but alas, he is a doctor and professor at Whitmore. Elena and Caroline's new friend Jesse, who invited them to that party, he is a student in Wes Maxfield's class. And according to him, there's rumors that the good doctor is part of some secret society that gets together on campus and gets up to some weird stuff. Elena also learns that Dr. Maxfield knows about vampires. This is in episode 4 when they're at a ball and dancing together. And he warns her that there are people at the school watching her and her friends, asking questions she doesn't want them to ask. So she needs to pack up, drop out, and move back to Mystic Falls. Episode 6, Caroline, with help from Catherine, who's masquerading as Elena, they ambush and tie up Wes Maxfield in his lab so that they can drain him of vervain and compel him to think that Caroline and Elena are not vampires. Caroline then takes the opportunity to question him, and she learns about the secret society. It's called Augustine, and they're the ones who covered up Megan's death, their roommate who died in the first episode. Not just because it was a vampire attack broadly, but because it was the Augustine vampire. In episode 8, they then discover that Jesse has been turned into a vampire. Caroline's blood was in his system because Stefan had had his memory completely erased, and he was basically a new vampire and attacked him. The person who turned Jesse was Wes Maxfield, who just sort of killed him while he had vampire blood in his system. And he's been studying and experimenting on him since. Jesse has managed to now break out and escape. Jesse, though, has started to crave vampire blood and feeding on vampires. Elena kills him because he's attacked Damon. This is while Damon's at Wes's lab. I'm not sure where Wes's lab is. I guess it's in Whitmore House, but it looked like they were in a dorm room. I don't know. But Damon is questioning Wes about his work to create a vampire that feeds insatiably on other vampires. It's his big plan to get rid of the vampire problem. At the end of this episode, Damon finds a blood bag in the lab fridge that has a 5-digit code on it. It's 12144. And he's like, what's this? And Wes Maxfield's like, why do you ask? And Damon says, because I was 21051. And Wes is like, oh, you are an Augustine vampire. And so that's the second time we've heard that. And now it's like, what is this Augustine vampire situation? What's going on? And Wes manages to hit a button in his room that shoots out aerosolized vervain and puts Damon down. And then throws him into a cell.
I love how far we've come with the vervain through the air vents. It's like season 1 is oh, vervain wasn't even in Mystic Falls. Then we got flowers being grown discreetly by Uncle Zach and some vervain elixir made by mixing it with water and diluting it. And suddenly it's no, now it's just coming out of the air conditioning.
Pioneered by, I believe Pastor Young's the first one to do it. I can't think of anyone who does it before that.
I think Caroline's dad does it at the beginning of season 3 when he's got her tied up.
Yes. In the Forbes jail?
Yeah. While he says, your ancestors built this place, and then describes that it's got reinforced shackles and vervain is pumped through the air system. And I'm like, did they build it with the ventilation system? What era were these ancestors living in?
The ventilation system could mean just a channel through the wall to the outside or to another chamber where there's just vervain being grown, I guess.
Just vervain being grown in front of a fan?
In front of a natural draft. They're taking advantage of the environment, okay? They were pioneers. But yes, episode 9, called The Cell, is the first episode in which we actually see Enzo. We learn about Damon being captured in the 1950s by a Dr. Whitmore, who is the founder of Augustine, and that this Dr. Whitmore experimented on Damon for the purpose of advancing medicine to the benefit of humanity. Elena also learns that Her father was part of Augustine. This is right before she gets vervained by Wes Maxfield and then put in a cell next to Damon. This is where Damon tells her the only reason he didn't go crazy under medicalised torture was because he had a cellmate and friend called Enzo. We start to get flashbacks of Enzo, played by Michael Malarkey, who... Ooh, this is gonna be crazy. So, Fadzai, we recently had the discussion where I revealed to you that, in fact, Michael Malarkey is... I mean, it's arguable to be like, oh, he's not a white man. He very well may consider himself a white man. His grandfather is Palestinian and Lebanese, I think. I think his mother... They say his mother has Palestinian and Lebanese origins and then Italian. But his grandfather is like a Palestinian poet of some great renown, which I thought was really cool. Did not know that my entire life. Only found that out like last year.
A lot of...
Uh-huh.
I'm about to say something insane that we can cut from the final,
Sure.
final draft. I was going to say a lot of Wasians in the Vampire Diaries.
It's true. It's true. I don't think that's crazy to say. But the other thing I found out this week is that... So Michael Malarkey on Wikipedia is credited as being British American, right? Which I was like, okay, you know, British actors will sometimes go over to America for work and then get dual citizenship. No, he's American with a British parent. Michael Malarkey is like an American man.
Oh, I thought we knew this.
I didn't know this. He has like an American accent and everything.
Have we
I
not
was
discussed
stunned.
how flawless his English accent was, and we were surprised, and we compared it to, no shade, James Marsters as Spike in Buffy.
Did this happen? I don't remember this conversation.
I don't know. Maybe I saw through the folds of space and time, and I...
Well, no, it's fully possible I forgot and then found out anew this week that he is in fact just an American guy. I looked up a video because I was like, I wonder if he has the same affect as Enzo, where he's like, oh, well, I'm like, surely this man doesn't speak like that in real life. And I found, in fact, he doesn't speak at all like that in real life. Fully different accent. So that was revealing and surprising.
Probably the best accent work in this universe.
So good. So, I mean, I have to assume because he has British family. Like, he did apparently study in England as well.
Because I've been rewatching things, and I think I was a lot more lenient as a teenager, because now it is impossible for me not to pick up on the Australian vibes coming through Haley and Cole and Rebecca's lines.
And what's her name? Liv from season 6.
Okay, maybe I haven't watched season 6 enough. I'll have to go back.
I think because I just was recently rewatching some. I'm like, oh, it's coming through. I see it now.
I see.
But anyways, Enzo St. John was a soldier in Europe during World War II. This is Damon telling Elena. Apparently he was discovered by Dr. Whitmore while he worked as like a battlefield medic. He drugged Enzo, locked him in a coffin, and shipped him to Mystic Falls, which is wild. And so Enzo's been in Augustine for 10 years before Damon showed up. While they're in the cell in this flashback of Damon's getting their rations, Enzo sees Damon gulping down his blood and says, "Are you doing it wrong, mate?" This episode's going to be full of bad British accents.
Speaking of flawless accent work.
I would apologize to the Brits, but no, I shall not. Shan't. Do you get that reference? I don't know if you do.
I don't.
It's Emily Blunt in The Devil Wears Prada.
Oh, I have not watched that in a while, but I have some Emily quotes in my mind. Emily
fair.
as Emily. Like her being upset that Anne Hathaway's character, Andy, is going to get to go to Paris. And she's like, you eat carbs for Christ's sake. Like, as if that is the single most
cardinal
sinful thing
in their business.
Or when she says, which now I'm like looking back, I'm like, oh, the fashion industry, oh dear. This is a person who's not even a model in the film. She just works as like a designer or something.
Just
like
as
an assistant.
as someone in the business, right? Exactly. You're not going to be on the runway.
She shows up to a function and some colleague from the industry compliments her on her figure and they're like, oh, you look so good. And she's like, oh, thank you. I have this fantastic new diet where I don't eat anything at all. And then when I feel like I'm about to faint, I have a cheese cube. And I was like, what?
That movie. I love it. I mean, listen, it was intentional, right? It was.
Yeah.
It was writing a weird line where it was like, actually, this industry is really messed up, but also, don't you love all these glamorous clothes and aren't these powerful women icons? It's like, yeah, I guess.
They certainly terrified me, and I never had any intention of working in the fashion industry. I was like, you're all so mean. Also, Zelina?
Yes, a very, very proto-Selena and early Rachel. What's her name? Rachel Madden? Rebecca Marder. I had the R and the M.
Rebecca Michelson.
Yes, a very early Zelina in a subservient role, which is quite unlike her.
I was stunned.
But nonetheless, Enzo says Damon's doing it all wrong. He's living for the moment rather than living for the future, living with the idea that he's going to get out of here. And Enzo paints a picture of his future revenge on Dr. Whitmore, which is the thing that's keeping him going while he's trapped here. We also start to see more flashbacks over the 5 years that they're in Whitmore House as cellmates, where Enzo's continually making conversation with Damon. He's talking about their interests. He's like trying to become bros with Damon essentially, while Damon's just kind of like lying in the cell. All woe is me, which let me not slander Damon. He is trapped in a torture cell. Then when they're talking about girls, Damon mentions without naming that his heart belongs to Catherine. And Enzo mentions a woman named Maggie that he was once sweet on. And that she used to work here for Dr. Whitmore. She was very charming and always kind to him. And she left when she learned what the doctor was actually doing to the vampires in the cells. Damon tells him it never would have worked out because he's a vampire and she was a human. And Enzo says, you need a more positive outlook. So that was interesting to me.
I mean, I'm on Damon's side here. As I've said before, this business of mortal characters being like, yeah, I can be in a long-term relationship with this person who doesn't age. But I have no intention of ever becoming a vampire myself. I'm like, okay, good luck.
In terms of Enzo, there's this interesting thing going on in this first episode where he shows up, where he's kind of Damon's like manic pixie dream boy. They're sort of both trapped in this rough situation, and Enzo's being this like beacon of hope and just being like, think of the future, think of a future in which you survive this and in which you get out. And it's very interesting looking back. What like having the perception I have of Enzo now is like fascinating to look back and see him in these scenes.
He certainly seemed like he was going to be more exciting. I will say that.
There's a moment where Dr. Whitmore comes in and asks who's next to go on the table, which, you know, is to be tortured again. The two of them are standing in their cells really quietly, and he picks out Damon, saying, you seem to have more energy. And then Enzo slams the bars and pipes up and goes, I take that as an insult. I'm far more energetic than my neighbor here. And so Dr. Whitmore goes away from Damon's cell and comes to take Enzo instead. He takes him away, and then we start to hear Enzo's cries as he's being worked on, having taken that on for Damon, which I also thought was like, wow.
Self-sacrifice. I mean, I guess all that is leading up to...
But the thing is, like, he's known Damon a week, maybe, a couple of weeks, maybe, and is just like, yeah, I'm gonna just volunteer to take on the torture so that this other guy doesn't have to. It's interesting. And we'll just kind of hold that, you know. Hold that in your hand. We then see a flashback to an annual event that Dr. Whitmore holds to show off his research to the Greater Augustine Society, which included some nobility from Mystic Falls. And Enzo is the one to put together the plan to pool their blood rations together for the year, because they know this thing is annual. He says this after the event they've just had to say, we need to be prepared in time for the next event when we get brought out to be paraded in front of these people. One of us has to drink both our blood rations to build up their strength and to fight off the Augustine people at the next event. So they do a rock, paper, scissors, and Enzo loses to Damon. So he gives up his rations for Damon to be the one to break free.
And I have to assume that he wasn't giving up 100% of them, because he would have definitely desiccated in a year.
So that's what they say is the thing. And he, in fact, doesn't desiccate even a little bit. He looks perfectly fresh when that next event comes around. He's just weak. So,
I mean, Catherine looked horrible after just a few weeks in the tomb during season 2. And we've seen vampires desiccate over like shorter periods of time. So I'm like, I don't think that you could go a whole year and desiccate without the person who is your captain noticing that, you're looking a little gray and dry. What's going on here?
It is a weird, like, plot holy thing that you just have to, like...
Also, we see, because they're being tortured as well, and we know that a vampire who is starving, their regeneration is not as top-notch. That's why when Caroline spent, like, 2 days being burned by her father, after a while the burns weren't even really healing because she was starving as well. So I'm like, after a whole year, wouldn't the doctor cutting into your eye and fiddling with your internal organs realize that, wait a second?
So, Damon does indeed break free and kill Dr. Whitmore, and then runs around killing anyone he can get to. And as people are scrambling to escape, a candelabra is knocked over and starts a fire. So weird to just have a candelabra. In the 50s, I think they had electrical lighting at that point, but, you know, far be it from me to criticize Whitmore's style.
It was for the ambiance.
Right? Like, we're in a secret society. Let's have some open flame. A fire hazard.
Also, again, I'm like, why did you not open Enzo's cell first?
Right.
Before you started doing all this?
I guess you could say, oh, it was the vampire bloodlust or whatever after the first guy killed. But I don't think...
You know what? That's the excuse I used when Aunt Jenna lunged for Greta's throat instead of just snapping her neck with her super speed and super strength.
Yeah.
I was like, she's a newly turned vampire. She's probably hungry. But I'm like, no, guys, let's be smart, please.
Let's use our brains. Damon, you've been a vampire for like 100 years at this point. But yeah, he goes around killing the Augustines. By the time Damon's done attacking people, the fire has spread considerably. And Enzo, who's still in his cell, tells Damon that they need to get out. But when Damon goes to break the bars of his cage, they are soaked in vervain, so he can't get a hold on them. Also, the fire's roaring around him, it's starting to heat up, and he then chooses to turn off his humanity switch and save himself, leaving Enzo behind in the inferno.
Enzo, who begs not to be left behind.
Yeah, it's rough.
Enzo, who's been here longer than Damon. Enzo, whose plan this was.
Enzo's been here for 15 years and has been coaching Damon through it and guiding him to maintain his hope that they're gonna get out. And Damon abandons him. At the end of the episode in present day, Elena wakes up. She's been like transferred from her cell. She's waking up from unconsciousness, brought up to the lab, and there's some melodic humming going on in the background. She tries to struggle from where she's strapped down to a medical bed, and she looks to her right and she sees a man strapped into a bed next to her. And we see that this is Enzo. He introduces himself, in fact, as 12144. I'm Enzo. And he's apparently still been here for the last 60 years. And that's where the episode ends. It's a rough start.
Yeah, I still had high hopes at that point.
Just a little fun aside, he's humming a song called Walkin' After Midnight, which is from the 60s by Patsy Cline. And the episode ends with Michael Malarkey singing a little portion of it, which was cute. Because he is, of course, a singer and musician.
Oh, yes, that's hence the... the season 8 stuff.
Exactly. Ooh, we'll get there. Next episode, 50 Shades of Grayson. Damon manages to escape his cell in present day in this really stupid... He grabs a bullet that Aaron had fired trying to shoot him, but of course he didn't die. And he puts it in the keyhole, and then he hits it with vampire strength, and I guess the gunpowder goes off, and it shoots the lock broken, and then he gets out. So, you know,
really fast and loose with these vampire superpowers.
Yeah. He ropes in Stefan to go hold Aaron Whitmore hostage. Aaron Whitmore, who is Wes Maxfield's ward, so that Wes will release Elena, because he's still got Elena in his little Whitmore lab. As a counter to that, Wes goes and gets Enzo and shoots him up with some sort of viral injection and gives him a blood bag to feed on. And that injection is to make sure that he'll come back to Wes for the antidote after he sends him out. And he sends him to go after Damon. So Enzo goes to Wes's classroom, because of course he is still a professor at Whitmore, where the exchange is supposed to go down. Damon, Stefan, and Aaron Whitmore arrive there and see Enzo seated in the classroom seats, arms stretched out. I'm sort of like, I bet you're wondering why I've gathered you all here. He greets Damon, saying it's been a while. And Stefan's like, who are you?
He greets Damon saying, surprise, bitch. I bet you thought you'd seen the last of me.
Me in the 50s when you abandoned me. So Stefan's like, who are you? And Enzo turns to him and says, Lorenzo. But my friends call me Enzo. And he steps and walks up to them and says, kidding, I don't have any friends. Looking very pointedly at Damon.
Which self-fulfilling prophecy for the rest of his time on this show.
It's so true. He manifested it. God, this is really funny. He offers his hand to Stefan, being like, good to meet you. Stefan stares at it and does not shake it. A mistake that will cost him 2 years of so much annoyance in his life. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Damon introduces Enzo as, quote, another Augustine vampire. Our cells were next to each other. Anyways, we're here to meet Wes Maxfield. Where's he? Just complete stonewall of this guy. Of course, Enzo's like, oh, nothing about how I saved your life and you left me to die in a fire to save your own ass. All right, cool. Aaron's like, what on earth is going on? And Enzo says, have a seat. I've been waiting 70 years to tell my story. Oh, bless. I do feel bad for him in season 5. I can't lie.
He suddenly becomes a superhero cartoon TV villain.
Yeah, exactly. About to launch into his monologue.
Let me explain my tragic backstory.
My father in the mines. It's like, okay, I don't think that means you should bomb orphanages, but that's just me. When we cut back to them, Enzo's sitting at the teacher's table. He's sitting on the teacher's table. He's dramatically recounting some of the stuff that we saw in the flashbacks an episode ago. While Damon stands there looking like a dog who's peed all over the carpet. Stefan comes back. He's gone on a phone call with Wes, and he says Wes isn't sending Elena. Damon immediately turns from Enzo and goes, what, did he not hear that we've got Aaron? And Stefan's like, he's willing to risk it. And Aaron says, let me talk to him. He'll listen to me. And then Enzo, in the back of the scene, rips out a classroom chair from the ground and throws it against the wall, catching everyone's attention. And he says, where were we? Ah, right. I was telling my story and you were politely listening.
I was like, oh, Enzo, sweetie, it's season 5. They don't care.
The thing is, this is going to be his mode the rest of the time he's here, sort of shouting at nobody who's listening about his story and his plight, which I've come to realize, no fault of his own, the story just really doesn't know what to do with Enzo is the problem. And so it always turns out that he's just like convinced that he's got main stuff going on while everyone else is looking away from him at other things that are going on. Enzo then goes and gets a bottle of whiskey and he says Damon's staying with him while Stefan and Aaron go and try to go deal with the Wes issue. And so Enzo starts to banter with Damon and they're like basically like trading barbs, and then Enzo starts to double over and he tells Damon that Wes has injected him with something that will kill him if he doesn't go back to get the antidote. Damon then uses that as an opportunity to try to sway him into giving up Wes's location, and Enzo asks, did Damon even think about him in the time that he's been gone? Or has he just lived his happily ever after? And Damon's like, we'll go back, we'll kill him together. But Enzo says his antidote depends on him killing Damon. And then grabs him and throws him out the classroom window. And then out on the quad, they're fighting for like 2 seconds max, and the poison starts killing Enzo. He's like falling over to the ground. Even as this is happening, Damon keeps asking him, where's Elena? I need to find my girlfriend. So Enzo's like, it might be good for you to know what it's like to miss someone for the next 60 years. And I was like, that's kind of sad. That's like, from Enzo's perspective, Damon was the best friend he'd had in maybe decades, right? We'll come to learn when he was turned and like what the in-between of that was like. And it's like, to make a good friend under the adversity of incarceration and then have them intentionally leave you behind is heartbreaking.
Yeah.
After Stefan and Aaron find where Wes is keeping Elena, she's already broken free and knocked Wes out, so that's whatever. Damon then takes Enzo there and jabs him with a bunch of stuff until the right antidote works. And he's like, okay, now that my girlfriend's safe, I figured maybe I'll try and keep you from dying. Enzo vamp rushes him and Damon punches through his chest, grabbing his heart. And he explains to Enzo that he had to shut off his humanity to leave Enzo behind. Which, of course, to Damon is like, that's how much I care about you, that I had to switch my humanity off and leave you to die. Don't you see how much you mean? Fun times. Fun thing to be Damon's friend. Enzo's like, what? Now you feel remorse, regret, pain? Even if I forgave you, Damon, would that make you less of a horrible person? And Damon starts to squeeze on his heart and says, we're even, and then lets go of Enzo. And Enzo finally says, you were the most important person in my life, and you ruined me. That's just who you are, who you'll always be, a monster. And leaves.
And now that I think about that, I can only assume that that was supposed to be threaded back into the Delena of it all.
Yes. Exactly so. Because we're in a season of analyzing what is the morality of Damon. Is Damon someone that Elena can truly consider a romantic partner, considering all the awful he's done? And it's like, we're unearthing all the bad stuff he's done that we didn't know about. And it's like, well, I guess no, he can't be. But the thing is, 2 episodes after this, Enzo comes back, right? His hair's shorter, a shame. He looked really nice with like shoulder length hair, I thought. He's wearing a scarf, a choice. He rocks up at Aaron Whitmore's dorm room and snatches him and brings him to the Salvatore house as a little present for Damon. And he tells him that, oh, I've done some soul searching. I've visited the barber. And while doing all that, I've learned that you have been going through on the promise you made to wipe out almost the entire Whitmore family at each generation. And maybe I've written you off too quickly. So it's like, okay, the Enzo we receive in episode 10, who's like decrying Damon for abandoning his friend and for all of that, is now like, oh, I see all the violence that you've carried out in the name of vengeance. And maybe actually this means we can find some sort of new friendship, you know, based on that. It's just an interesting shift of footing. Enzo says, all you have to do is kill Aaron, give us both closure, and we can start anew. And it's just interesting that, like, when last they saw each other, he was calling Damon a monster. And now he's like, if you don't do this, that means you've gone soft. And it's just... It's just a little incongruous to me. I don't know.
I mean, he is the one who inspired this plan in Damon. He was like, oh, Damon,
Certainly.
dream of what you will do when you escape. And Damon was like, I'll kill them all. And then Enzo was like, that's boring. And Damon was like, wait. I'll kill them all except for one person who I will leave alive to continue the line. And then every few decades or so, I'll pop back in, massacre the family, and repeat this cycle. And then Enzo's like, now we're talking.
For sure.
So
it's just
I guess it should have already been surprising that someone who saw their friends say, I will haunt this family through the ages and murder innocent people who have done me no wrong, could then also leave you behind to die because they were at risk themselves. And then you're like, oh, don't act shocked.
Exactly. Then it becomes a don't act shocked for Enzo, because why are you then surprised that he left you behind? If you not only know the type of person he is, you want him to be this person. It's interesting that, like, as you say, the crux of that story beat is that, like, it's a Mark 1 in the column of what a bad guy Damon is, right? Season 5 is saying. But now Enzo is becoming the devil on Damon's shoulder, egging him on to do his worst. So it's just an interesting, like, I find it weird that they're having him play both sides of that. Which, again, is something Enzo will come to do very often.
He seems, as a character, because Damon is so often just awful to people.
Yes.
You would have to wonder, who would be Damon's friend?
Right.
What kind of a person would continue to hold this man in high regard? We had already seen in season 3 with the introduction of Sage, we saw that in the flashback, she was kind of Damon's mentor. She was the Lexi to his Stefan, if you will. He was a newbie vampire, and she was like, no, let me teach you what kind of vampire to be. Disregard human life. Enjoy the kill. Manipulate and use people. And now it's like, now we have Enzo who's kind of the same? It's like Damon was already pretty bad, but now Enzo is the person who inspired Damon to do the worst thing he's ever done until season 6 reveals the 90s stuff.
Right.
And also, going forward, he's going to be the person who really wants Damon to be awful in a season where everyone else is begging Damon to just behave. So it's like, is he the new Sage? Is he Damon's new Lexi? What are the intentions with this character? And I feel as though the writers themselves weren't entirely sure.
That's my feeling of like, because all the flashback stuff and then confronting him in present day to be like, what a monster you are to have done this. Here I am in present day, a reminder of your failings from 50, 60 years ago. It's this admonishment of Damon, at least textually. And I guess if you go beyond that, you can just sort of go, well, Enzo's upset that he left him, Enzo, behind, not of the greater concern that like Damon is this type of person who would do something so monstrous. But it's that Enzo very directly says, you, Damon, will never change. You as a person, you are a monster. And then 2 episodes to come back and say, let the monster out.
He came back, it was like, you will never change, you're a monster, ... And then he comes back and he's like...
And actually, I like that.
I like that.
Actually, I'm really into that.
You are a monster, parenthesis, affection.
It's a shame because there's so much pathos in that initial Enzo you're presented, who could have very well then become, I mean, like he's been, the situation he's been through for 60 years. I don't expect Enzo to be a saint, you know what I'm saying? But it was just like, he had this whole tragic and like sympathetic thing going on where it's like, he's this hopeful person who saved Damon within that 5 years from like losing his mind or losing hope and then was left behind for it. He should be Damon's number one enemy. But aside from that, he was this like, I don't know, there's another path that they could have taken with Enzo that might have been very interesting. That is a little bit more the Lexi, like you're saying.
Yeah.
And then it wouldn't be Elena's job, you know? When Aaron wakes up, because of course he's been knocked unconscious, and Enzo is pressing Damon to kill him, Damon snaps Enzo's neck, because right now he can't kill Aaron because he's Elena's friend, and supposedly Elena would hate him for that. So he compels Aaron to pack up all his stuff and leave town. But at the end of the episode, we see Damon has reunited with Enzo because at this point, Catherine, once again masquerading as Elena, but this time inside her body, has broken up with Damon. So now he's like, nothing matters. I can do whatever I want. The only thing holding me back was the love of this one person. So Damon and Enzo stop Aaron leaving town using their body in the road gambit, and they kill him. And yeah, that's the end of that one.
And now we know that with Enzo's egging on, Damon has gone off the deep end.
Yep.
For real this time.
Damon is unreignable, unsavable. Enzo is the fault here. Enzo is the one who's making him do this. Total Eclipse of the Heart, episode 13. It's the morning after all this. Stefan comes to find Damon. His car is parked against the wall of the house. He seems to have driven onto something because it's like elevated on the front left. It's very strange. It's also covered in blood, assumedly Aaron's blood or someone else they've killed later that night. He asks Damon about it, who tells him everything because who cares? Elena dumped me. I can do whatever I want, blah, blah, blah. And then Enzo comes through the door and says, it was my idea if it makes you feel any better. And then he introduces himself again to Stefan, holds his hand out and says, remember me? And Stefan, second time, does not acknowledge the hand and says, yeah, I remember you were trying to rip Damon's head off. There's a little part of me that's like, Stefan, maybe you brought this on yourself a little bit. I don't know.
I mean, Stefan, I think Stefan, like you, was a bit confused. He was like, weren't you heartbroken and angry and bitter and...
Isn't this the guy that abandoned you and now you guys are out on a bender? I guess I'm the only one who's confused here. That's fine. So Damon's like, hey, you spend 5 years in a dungeon with someone. You have a pretty unbreakable bond. We'll put a pin in that one. Anyways, the two of them are now out looking for Wes Maxfield, who's still alive. They want to close out their big revenge plan. As an aside, this is the point where it becomes this weird battle for Damon's soul, right? As you were saying, Enzo on the one shoulder, and now Stefan must be on the other shoulder to try and keep him balanced. So there's not a lot going on actually for Enzo in this time. He has now sort of become attached to Damon as a supplement to Damon's story. But, you know, on their way to apparently keep torturing Diane Freeman. If you'll remember, Diane Freeman, campus security at Whitmore, she's part of Augustine. Enzo asks Damon while they're on the way to the room that they're keeping her, what do you think about a road trip when they're done with Augustine? Maybe South America? And Damon's like, I'm not thinking that far ahead. Because, of course, Damon's in a shame spiral about Elena. They kill Diane. It's not super important. Stefan goes to speak to Enzo as he's burying her in the woods. And Stefan's come in all like big man, hands on the hips. He tells Enzo to find a new best friend because Damon's in a bad place right now and all Enzo's doing is enabling him. Enzo says Damon mentioned that his brother was a bit of a do-gooder, which is like, all right. Stefan, and these are direct quotes, Stefan's like, you know what makes somebody walk a straight line? When they have no choice but to be the balance for somebody who's about to fall off the edge. Which is a very depressing way that he has defined himself in life, but we've said enough on that. Enzo responds, but it's so much more fun when you just commit to the leap. You're welcome to join in on the fun. You look like you could use it. Now, I know we have an agenda here and it was an animal attack, right? Maybe we try to queer too much, you know? But there's an interesting vibe that goes on between Stefan and Enzo when they're not explicitly at odds, and also a little bit when they are explicitly at odds. So I just want to like throw that out there for whoever's catching it. Enzo hands Stefan a shovel, and when he turns away, Stefan uses it to whack him over the head, and Enzo falls to the ground.
You did that on purpose.
I actually did it. I honestly did, but I love that. It's truly just instinct to write that anytime something bludgeoning happens. He then puts the handle tip to Enzo's chest. I don't know if he snapped it or if it's just like naturally been broken down to like a somewhat perfunctory wooden tip. Puts it to Enzo's chest and presses in just a little bit, just the tip, not enough to do any damage.
We're queering it now.
Do you see what I'm saying? It truly is like the metaphor's right there. And he tells Enzo to leave town and to not look back. Enzo grabs the wood and pulls it further into himself. Kind of.
He's like, this ain't my first rodeo.
This ain't my first rodeo.
You don't have to go slow with me, Stefan.
Save a horse, ride a cowboy. He's sort of mad dogging Stefan a little bit. He's like, oh, you think this hurts? What could you do that hasn't been done to me already 100 times over? Go on, give it your best shot. Stefan, for like a second, looks a little bit surprised to see Enzo kind of like pull the stake further into his chest. He flips the shovel though, and he puts the like blade end of the shovel to Enzo's throat and says, what I do to you, Enzo, will be final. You got it? Be sure I never see you again. So props to Stefan for keeping his cool. Anyway, Damon and Enzo then go to Whitmore where Bonnie and Jeremy are hanging out. They kidnap Jeremy and torture him as a way to force Bonnie to do a locator spell on Wes. Bonnie, by the way, who doesn't have magic and has not had magic the entire year, but they're just being like, figure it out. So that's fun. I'd also like to point out that this is Bonnie and Enzo's first encounter in which Enzo is crushing Jeremy's head between his hands.
Crushing her current boyfriend's head between.
Yep. Later onwards, Enzo's got Jeremy tied up where he's been beating him up, incising him with a fire poker, and then puts a plastic bag over his head and asphyxiates him to the point of death. Because in his mind, you don't make a threat unless you can back it up. You need to show people that you're willing to follow through. So even though there are people actively trying to solve his problem for him, he's just torturing Jeremy just cause.
To the point of death?
To the point of like suffocation. To the point where Jeremy like starts to like fall over.
Oh.
And then he removes it. Fortunately, Stefan and Catherine, who is still masquerading as Elena, rush in to intervene. Stefan takes on Enzo while she's trying to resuscitate Jeremy. It's that fun moment where she has to give him CPR.
Yes, she's so grossed out.
She's
like, ugh, ew, I have to give mouth to mouth to this teenage boy.
It's just like, wow, Catherine. So Stefan's fighting Enzo, and he's like, you should have left when I told you to. And Enzo's like, did I give you the impression I was taking orders from you? My bad. Stefan starts throwing him around because, of course, Stefan's older. Nearly gets him with a fire poker, but Enzo throws a stake into Catherine Lena to distract him. And then Damon comes in and says, we found Wes. And the two of them leave. They do find Wes in his creepy abandoned hospital, but he has apparently struck a deal with the Travelers, who use magic to knock Enzo and Damon out. So, that's that. And Wes injects Damon with the Ripper virus. Our favorite storyline. The Ripper virus. Real exciting.
The virus that, we can get into it in a separate episode. The idea that now Ripper is just this vague, nebulous term, whereas before it seemed to be like a metaphor for like addiction, which is about brain chemistry, but also it was a little bit influenced by maybe like trauma, which also fine.
Yeah,
still brain chemistry, but now it's just a virus that you can give someone.
I'm injecting you with alcoholism. It's cool stuff.
I'm like, no, guys, did you not do bio in school? A virus and a disease are not the same thing.
Certainly you could make, this is dark stuff, but you could make someone dependent on some sort of narcotic if you spent a long amount of time, like
oh, absolutely. That is you've seen season 1 of Jessica Jones.
I have, yes.
That is what Kilgrave does to Malcolm, who is played by the actor who plays Diego in the originals.
Yeah, Edgar Darville.
He needs a spy on Jessica, so he mind controls Malcolm into doing drugs to the point where he is now just properly physically addicted, so that he's like, okay, now I know that when I send you to do something, even when my mind control wears off in 12 hours as it does, you will eventually come back to me because you need more drugs from me, and now I have a willing slave.
Yeah. God, Kilgrave.
But it's just it's just the idea that we're now saying like, oh, this virus
One
is
shot.
Causing what you have figuratively made this like mental illness, and now a virus is causing it. I'm like, I know sometimes these things, virus, bacteria, illness, disease can ebb and flow into each other, but they're not always synonyms. So
yeah, it's TV science. I guess you kind of have to let it go, but it is frustrating narratively and thematically.
Because I'm like scientifically, what is he even doing? What is he injecting into Damon that is making
antibodies. He's splicing the proteins, the telomeres, right? That's a thing.
And it's making you hungry for vampire
blood specifically.
Which, as far as we know, doesn't have, in terms of feeding a vampire, doesn't have any qualities that human blood lacks.
No.
Because Michael, we know, was sustaining himself on vampire blood exclusively, apparently, for 1,000 years.
Right.
So
I don't know. Wild choices. They do spend the next episode on the hunt because now that Damon has the Ripper virus in him, he needs to feed on vampires, which puts Enzo directly at risk as a vampire. But Enzo doesn't leave because, by his own words, he doesn't abandon his friends. And because his insistence on going after Wes is what got Damon infected to begin with. But because you don't run into a vampire every other day, this of course means they are running around turning people into vampires for Damon to feed on and kill, which is distressing.
Earlier I was gonna say, maybe it's not that Enzo thought Damon was a monster in general. He thought he was a monster because Damon was not valuing vampire lives, i.e. Enzo's life. Because, Damon's the kind of person who's like, humans, they're food and or something for me to kill when it suits my fancy if I'm bored, Vicky. And maybe Enzo would agree with that ideology, but was like, yeah, but you left behind me, a fellow vampire who was suffering with you. But now I'm like, but now you're turning people into vampires to feed your friend.
You're building a cattle farm of vampires for your friend to slaughter and eat. So it's like, that can't be. That can't be the case.
So now I'm like, Enzo, I think what's happening is you're just lying to yourself. You're like one of those people who will go onto social media, their Twitter account or whatever, and wax poetic about how you can't depend on anyone, friendships are fake, and, nobody in this world is in your corner, it's just you alone. And then when 5 or so of your friends show up and they're like, oh my gosh, have I done something? Are you upset? Can I help you? You're like, no, not you. There's one person who's actually upset you. So it's like Enzo doesn't think Damon's a monster because of who Damon is. It's like, no, you left me. That's why you're a terrible person.
You left me. I could have forgiven everything, but you left me behind. Crazy.
You left me, and now I'm gonna pretend that I'm upset that in general,
Right.
you're just a terrible person.
Now I'm going to make a
Damon.
moral issue about it. That's the only way you can look back on it now. Wild. As an aside, Radioactive by Imagine Dragons is playing in the background of this scene, and the guy they've turned into a vampire wakes up gasping for breath on time
Oh,
with
yes!
the gasp for breath in the first verse of that song, which I
It
thought
was
was
cheesy, it was
It's
camp,
cheesy as hell.
but I loved it. I loved it.
love everything about it.
Breathing in the chemicals, the character in the show wakes up like,
So stupid. I love it. So the two of them, though, get trapped in that house by the travelers who rock up with Wes Maxfield. Again, they've struck a deal. Wes is observing his experiment. He wants to test how potent the Ripper virus is and see how long Damon can keep from feeding on even his best friend when he's trapped with no alternative source of blood.
which, just as an aside, I'm like, Wes, in the decades that this Augustine thing has existed, it seems like Enzo is the only vampire
Yes.
that you've had, except for like 5 minutes of Jesse since Damon escaped. So I'm like, so you currently have 2 vampires out of the total 3 that you've ever had, it seems, and you're willing to just sacrifice one of them for the sake of an experiment?
And you're
I'm not a
sacrificing
scientist.
The one you've been
but this
working on for 60 years. You're sacrificing your prime test subject for some other guy. Which is wild. There will be more from a scientific perspective that's just questionable. But, that's just me as a former scientific person being like, what's going on here? Enzo says, Damon, you've got people we can call, like your brother or your ex-girlfriend. And Damon refuses to call either of them. And Enzo's like, oh, you wouldn't risk their lives, but my life is perfectly fine on the line.
There we go.
Eventually, Enzo decides to chain Damon up because he's like, listen, at some point you're gonna get hungry no matter how much you don't want to feed on me. And once he's chained Damon up, he grabs his phone and calls Stefan himself. Unfortunately for him, it's Catherine Lena who answers. They're at the Motel 6 where Stefan's in the shower and Catherine's trying to make a move. She's invested in Damon being dead, so she does not pass on Enzo's message that they need help. I have to assume eventually Stefan does see it on his phone, though. Wes opens the door and shoots Enzo in the shoulder. This is the part where I'm like, okay, now we're messing with the controls of the experiment. You can't change the experiment in the middle of it and still have a consistent result. He's like, I'm testing how strong Damon can become when he's enraged with bloodlust. And it's like, this is now a different experiment. You've changed the hypothesis. The scientific process is questionable at best. Damon does in fact break free. I guess the bloodlust giving him a little boost of strength. Feeds on Enzo, but then the travelers raise the acidity of Enzo's blood so that Damon pulls away. This episode is so weird.
Now what? What even is this experiment?
I
Because
don't
now-
know. I do not know what they want. They let Enzo out because apparently Wes needs him for something or the travelers need him for something. It's not clear. And that's where that ends.
I'd love to read Wes's
His notes.
on this experiment. Like, what conclusions did you draw? What was your hypothesis? What were you hoping to find, and how did you find it?
I need to see the models. I need to see the storing of results. Where's the graph? While you were sleeping, episode 16, Elena and Damon are now both infected with the Ripper virus. Elena's got that werewolf strain that's going to ultimately kill her. So Stefan and Caroline go meet with the travelers to get the antidote. Enzo's just kind of there. He's apparently been with the travelers for weeks now because there's a time jump after Elena gets her body back. And he explains, because he's just bestie with the travelers now, he explains he let Wes experiment on him in that interim time, which feels so wild to me. But they do say what the motivation was. But he's let Wes experiment on him, and that's how he made an antidote for the Ripper virus, specifically the werewolf strain as well. Once Stefan has agreed to let the travelers use him, sort of psychically, to locate his last living doppelganger for their purposes, Enzo delivers the antidote to Damon and Elena towards the end of the episode. So that's all he does in this one.
Oh, and you know what? I can't believe I forgot this.
Mm-hmm.
So this strain that Elena has also has werewolf venom / toxin.
Yes.
They use those terms interchangeably in this show. In it, so it is basically killing her like a werewolf bite would.
Yes.
And then they use human science to cure her of not just the Ripper virus, but the werewolf toxin
Yes.
as well. So already in season 5 of the Vampire Diaries, which is running concurrently with season 1 of the originals, we've seen that you can cure werewolf venom without Klaus's blood.
Yep.
That's interesting, because it did feel very sudden when in season 3, a character suddenly pulls out a vial of some clear liquid that seems to be scientific and not mystic in nature and cures themselves of a werewolf bite in the original.
They got those Augustine
and
notes.
I was like... And this is several years after Augustine is no more. And it's like, did he go and find them?
Went to Whitmore campus, trolled through those underground labs, got all the notes, dipped. Listen, he's a man of means. He's got an entire organization at his back, right? Doesn't he? I think so.
I think
he's got a sideline.
Well, it just seems as though maybe Stefan didn't need to leave town with Klaus at the end of season 2. He could have just cured Damon with some medicine.
So disappointing. Oh, Enzo's also the one that they're sending to kill that last living doppelganger. And Caroline's tagging along. Well, technically, Caroline has promised to do it in exchange for them leaving Stefan the hell alone. And Enzo's
This is
tagging
when
along.
they meet. Ugh, brace yourselves. This is post Klaus leaving their side of the world for good. And he and Caroline have, banged it out one time to satisfy the
They've
shippers.
knocked boots in the middle of the woods.
They were like, this ship is never going to be a thing, but just, because some of you hung in there that long, we're going to let them hook up one time, and then he'll leave. Her post-breakup friendship with Tyler will be ruined.
Yep, forever.
But don't be sad, because we have another morally questionable Brit who's going to now flirt with her and try to get into her pants. Do you like that? No? Okay, well, we tried.
And that really is what this episode feels like. I don't know how they would have gotten the feedback so quickly. But Rescue Me, episode 17. Enzo and Caroline are looking for Tom Avery, Stefan's last living doppelganger. Well, Silas's last living doppelganger, who is a paramedic in Atlanta. While Caroline is threatening to kill Sloane, who is the Traveler's de facto leader at this point, because they are still using Stefan's brain as a psychic link, she makes a really violent threat on the phone and then slams it. And Enzo's like, oh, like a perky blonde angel of death. And I was like, all right. Okay, what's happening?
He's like, trying so hard. I think earlier he tells her, when he's flirting with her, he's like, I've heard you've got a thing for guys with accents. And I was like, well...
He says that in this episode, and I'm like, okay, all right, guys. Even as someone who's not the biggest fan of Klaus, I can be like, this is not a sufficient replacement. I'm sorry. I don't even care about the Caroline link, but this is not the same thing. He spends the whole episode trying to cozy up to Caroline. He's convinced that he has earned that right by delivering the antidote last episode to Damon and Elena, which, to be fair, by MFG standards, he should be their bestie by default, right? They've let in people into the group for far less. So there's a point at which he picks up a magazine. You're in a hospital. There's magazines. It's Cosmo or whatever. And he picks up a magazine because Caroline's not responding to him. Opens it and sees some pictures. And he's like, modern women. All bosom, no mystery. And then he looks at Caroline's chest and says, present company excluded. Which is what? What does that mean? Are you saying Caroline's boobs are small, but she's all substance? What are you?
I think he's saying Caroline's. She's a good girl. She's covered up. There's some mystery there.
Oh,
for him
I
to unravel.
see. He's talking about in terms of revealing, not in terms of having. Okay. So she's a good, modest girl who's sufficient for his fancies, I guess. Wow. First of all, doesn't know Caroline at all. Secondly, ew. So Caroline says, dear God, please don't tell me I'm the real reason you're here. And that's when he says, why not? From what Damon tells me, I am your type. It's just get me out of here.
And I was like, firstly, from what Damon tells you, already
largest
grain of salt. A clump of salt.
He does also say she reminds him of Maggie, who is the nurse that he liked from Augustine. And Caroline's like, let me guess, she made you a better person. Because she's been having to deal with Delena this entire season. And Enzo's like, no, she reminded me that I was good all along. And I was like, Okay.
Which I guess
Interesting.
is the thesis for Delena.
Yeah. Yeah, that actually Damon was inherently good the whole time and he didn't need any sort of proving or certainty that he was worthy of Elena by being a good person actively, because he's reverse Catholic. He's born with no sin inherently and never has to work his way up. So,
Reverse Catholic.
it's Catholics, right, who are like, you are born inherently with sin and you must work your way back to the light or something. Maybe that's a different denomination.
I mean, I think a lot of Christian denominations.
Yeah, let me
say
not
that.
target Catholics. It's okay because technically I was born Catholic, so I can say that. In the way that most Zulu people from a certain region are just born Catholic. It's fine. There is a nice moment, though, where Enzo says that he's not judging Caroline when Caroline's like trying to like hype herself up to go kill this Tom Avery guy, and Enzo is not convinced. And he's like, I'm not judging you. I'm preparing you for when you ultimately have to do this. I have experience from war with soldiers who freeze up on the battlefield, so I don't want that to happen for you. So that's a nice moment that they have in this episode. At the end, when Caroline is unable to kill Tom Avery, Enzo does it because he's got his own agenda the whole time he's here. The travelers have promised to help him find Maggie. So now it's like, oh, the whole time you've been here with the travelers, all that stuff with the antidote, it was because you've been looking for Maggie this whole time.
Oh, yeah, that was his motivation.
Yeah.
Maggie, the young nurse from 1950 something, who he now wants to find in 2012?
Yes. Caroline says if Maggie's anything like her, then she just lost all respect for Enzo. Enzo's face turns so completely. It like really hits him. He's almost in tears after Caroline says this. And he almost like he doesn't fully believe himself. He says, well, then I'll earn her forgiveness in time. Because unlike Caroline, he's willing to do whatever it takes for the people that he loves. And he leaves.
And again, I'm like, how much time? Isn't she like 70 now?
If even, she's probably like 80, 90 something at this point. The chances she is alive are very slim, given like the longevity of people from that time. But hey, there's certainly people still alive now who are like alive in the civil rights era, right?
Yeah.
Which she would have been, yeah, if this was the 50s, 60s. But yeah, next episode, Resident Evil, which is a fun reference. Again, a small appearance for Enzo. He's with Damon when the doppelganger dreams start up between Stefan and Elena. This is the second set of doppelganger dreams, the ones that are sent by Marcos. He and Caroline have it's this funny butler and nanny moment in the story where they're discussing the main conflict of the main characters while they're in another room eavesdropping on them, and they're like pouring drinks. I thought that was really funny. They're like friends again now, so it's okay. Caroline also brings up that it is, as you're saying, unlikely that Maggie is still alive. And even if she is, she would be ancient. And Enzo says he doesn't want to date Maggie. He wants to thank her, which is very, you haven't seen the movie, I think you've seen the show, but What We Do in the Shadows, one of the main characters is like, they were in love with someone however many decades ago, and then they lost touch because of a war or a famine or something, and he wants to find her in present day, which is really cute. He did find her for love though, so he was like, I'm down. Which I thought was cool. Very Stefan. Someone's locating where Marcos is. I think they're like following the doppelganger dreams where they're leading them to see where Marcos is. But it's not Stefan and Elena who are going, it's Damon and Enzo, because Damon's trying to prove something now because he's feeling insecure. When they find where Marcos is, Enzo goes with him. They find Marcos. Marcos tells Damon, we should take a walk and talk about like the main plot that I've got going on. And when Enzo moves to follow them, Marcos tells him to stay put and says, if you want to know where Maggie is, you'll stay right here. And Enzo is immediately healed like a dog.
Wow.
And that's the last we see of him in that episode again.
Excluded from the main plot.
Truly at
real time.
every juncture being physically barred from entering the main plot. Episode 19. This is a good one. This is like a chunky one for Enzo. We open with Stefan helping Elena and Barney study in the cafe at Whitmore. Enzo storms in and comes up to Stefan. Stefan, of course, is like, what are you doing here? And Enzo's like, what, can't I join my friends for a cup of tea? And Stefan says, Damon, your friend singular, is not here. And we are busy doing something. So Enzo sits down anyways and looks to Elena, who I don't think he's had a single conversation with in this season, by the way, since he showed up. Since they first were lying next to each other in the medical beds. He's like, I'm sure Caroline's told you I'm looking for my old sweetheart, Maggie. And we are suddenly thrown into a flashback as Enzo starts to go on about his and Maggie's growing attachment. And in the middle of that, Elena turns to Stefan and is like, what's going on here? Enzo's telling them that Sloane, the traveler, gave him a picture from Wes's Augustine files, and he passes it across the table to Stefan and Elena, and they see that it's Maggie on the ground with her head ripped off and placed next to her body. And she's apparently died in 1960 in Mystic Falls. Elena then turns to Stefan and is like, were you a Ripper in 1960? Before Stefan can say anything, Enzo says, clearly. And then Stefan goes, no, I wasn't a Ripper. I'm sorry about your friend, but that was not me. Enzo then calls for Liv, and it's like, Liv? How do you even know her? Why is Liv coming over from her work behind the counter at the cafe at Enzo's beck and call? She then uses magic in a room full of college students that I guess have been compelled to torture them, Stefan and Elena. And Enzo brings out some college students, some football bros, that have apparently kidnapped Luke. Luke, accomplished Gemini Coven witch Luke. Cool. Enzo's very powerful.
Well, the power was in the college bros. The power was homophobia.
You're so right.
That's
You're
how
so
they
right.
managed
They were
to
very
overpower
ready
Luke.
to take down a queer man in his prime, okay, enjoying his college years. Enzo then has Stefan and Elena tied up with vervain water-soaked ropes, and he's trying to get Stefan to confess to this crime of killing Maggie. Apparently, a diary of Maggie's was found on her at the crime scene, and he starts reading it out to, appeal to Stefan's guilt and emotions. He then rushes over to the other side of the room to catch Bonnie, who's been trying to contact Damon to come fetch his friend because he's wilding out. And Enzo's like, good idea, let's call Damon. Inform him that Stefan killed Maggie in the 60s, so it's an eye for an eye situation we're in right now. He calls Damon, and Damon tells him, like Stefan's been telling him, that Stefan wasn't even a Ripper in the 60s. But before he can finish that sentence, Enzo cuts him off and ends the call. So, some willful delusion going on over here. After some more reading of the diary, Stefan does then recall a night in the 60s where Maggie found him in Mystic Falls. She knew about vampires and was trying to get Stefan Salvatore, the name Salvatore, drew me to town. And he scared her off with his vampire face so that she would leave town. Enzo is convinced that he's lying. So he grabs Bonnie, by the way, and starts choking her, asking if his lies are worth Bonnie's life. Of course, Stefan then goes, actually, in fact, I did kill Maggie, and I'm the one you want, so let Bonnie go. And Enzo lets Bonnie go. Damon finally comes by and confesses that I'm the one who killed Maggie, and I framed Stefan for it, because Stefan didn't save me from a prison he never knew that I was in. So that's a whole other can of worms. Whole other problem.
Stefan, the brother who I alienated, didn't notice that I was missing.
Stefan, the brother who I told I owe a lifetime of misery and left, abandoned. Damon tells Enzo that he didn't do it to hurt him. He did it because his humanity was off and he didn't care. So actually it's cool, but if Enzo wants to hate him or kill him, that's fine. It's between the two of them. Enzo's like, that's the problem. I don't want to hate you, Damon, because if I do, then that means I have nothing left. Again, very sad pathos stuff going on with Enzo of the one friend he had in imprisonment abandoned him. The one girl he liked who was kind to him has been killed by that friend. He has no other ties in this world, right? As a roughly 110-year-old vampire. And honestly, it's this whole time in this episode, probably why he's been projecting all this stuff onto Stefan to begin with, because deep down he has to have considered Damon, who was freshly out of his Augustine imprisonment, might have been the one to kill this girlie who worked for Augustine.
Yeah.
You know?
Especially since he promised to find all these people and kill them.
Exactly. Enzo then goes, this is too much. I'm turning off my humanity switch. Damon's like, okay, cool, wonderful, super. You don't care about anything or anyone. Let's take that road trip you wanted to take. Where did you want to go? Cape Town? Which, shout out. It's not Cape Town, it's Cape Horn that Enzo's mentioned. So, like, Damon has not been paying attention at all to his one friend that actively wants to be his friend. Oh, it's so bad. It's so bad for Enzo. Enzo then feeds on Liv for whatever reason. I guess he just doesn't need reasons anymore. Damon rushes him, but Enzo breaks a bottle and jabs him through the neck. Stefan, pure strength, breaks free of the ropes that are binding him, does a leaping Superman punch, which was so cool. If you don't know what a Superman punch is, if you've ever seen that meme of Tobey Maguire jumping through the air with his arms and legs out, it's always going around on Twitter. Picture that, but then it ends with a punch to someone's face. If you've watched wrestling, you know what a Superman punch is.
I will have to look that up.
It's very cool.
This is like when I had to go Google what mollywopping was.
To explain mollywopping the other week. Point is, it's a very cool looking move, and props to the stunt guy who did it. It was very impressive. Enzo then dumps a bucket of vervain water on Stefan, grabs Elena, and runs. Elena, who's tied up as she is wont to do, even as a vampire, she tries to reach Enzo with her empathy guns while they're waiting for Damon to find them. She's like drawing on her own experience with the humanity switch. Enzo does not care. He goes over to break a sign, snap it over his leg, and make a makeshift stake. And Elena does use that moment to try and jump him. She leaps onto his back and wraps her like tied up hands around his neck, burning him with the vervain. But he manages to flip her over, and when she gets up again, he snaps her neck. Stefan arrives, having apparently found them before Damon could. He had left the cafe telling Damon, he's got Elena, he is hell-bent on hurting you in any way possible, so you need to deal with him now. The very obvious implication being there that, like, get rid of this man. Stefan and Enzo end up in a fight, in which Stefan draws him away from Elena and across the campus on Whitmore. And when we pick up with them again, they're in a car park, and Enzo throws Stefan against a car. And he says, I bet you wish you murdered me when you had the chance. Damon would have been furious. But I think it's time we both stop coddling him. Which, true. He then pops the petrol tank of the car that Stefan is now lying against and pulls out a lighter. I wish it had the UK flag on it. That would have been very fun. But it does not.
Hasn't he been in America for decades?
Right. Just been in America for 90 years. Still got my British flag, my Union Jack lighter. But he's going on and on about Maggie and where she might be and whatever. And he's like staring into the flame of this lighter. And he looks to Stefan and says, shall we burn together, you and I? This whole time, petrol is guzzling out on the ground around them. And then he like moves the lighter towards Stefan and is like, maybe just you. And this whole vibe is like super self-destructive. It's very much, as we're always saying, that like this humanity switch is not 100%. This is very much like self-destructive behavior after being like devastated by a big loss. The switch is a lie and a scam. It clearly does not help anything. Stefan takes this moment of like fortunate distraction and punches Enzo through the chest, grabs his heart, and he says, Damon sees something good in you. And Enzo's like, and you? Is there a part of you that thinks I can be redeemed? And Stefan says, not with his emotions off. Enzo's not going to stop until he kills Damon. Enzo says, better yet, wouldn't it be a sweet bit of revenge when Damon finds out you killed his best friend? He then douses the lighter and says, have fun sorting this with your brother. And then pulls himself off Stefan's hand, leaving his heart behind.
Which?
I am not even remotely describing that to be generous to Stefan in some way. That is textually what happens. Stefan does not move that whole time.
Just insane. I was like, I didn't know this was something you could do. I guess it makes sense. But
the thing is, right, again, going back to like the self-destructive tendency, it's like attached to that, he's like, I have nobody left. My friend has betrayed me twice. Girl I loved is dead. Outside of that, I have no one. So what do I have to live for, right? There is some sort of suicidality kind of attached to that. And it's interesting that all the devastation and the heartache of what he's trying to avoid is still present in that last moment where it's like, this is still not worth it. Where most people, when they turn off their humanity switch, gives them license to be like, cavalier, I don't care about anything. It's an avoidance tactic still, but it's like, I'm loving life, I'm living free, you know? It's interesting that like, that doesn't work for him. And seemingly in this moment, he chooses, even though it's like a little bit to spite Stefan, he's choosing to exit this mortal coil. And that's just like, it's weirdly fascinating. So much about Enzo is fascinating outside the like, complete confusion at the heart of his character.
I love that he, well, I say love somewhat ironically.
Yeah.
That he thinks to himself, my final act is to destroy the bond between the Salvatore brothers. As if we haven't had like 8 characters in the history of this show trying to do that. But I will destroy the bond between the Salvatore brothers when I essentially frame Stefan for murdering me, Damon's best friend. And I'm like, even if we assume that the title of best friend means anything to Damon, who we must remind you, Enzo, because you seem to have forgotten, left you to die.
Has not, beyond one bender when Elena broke up with him, has not been hanging out with you.
You think that Stefan and Damon, who have a history of getting past the most horrid things coming between them, are going to have a falling out over you? Ooh, might be overestimating your own importance there, methinks.
And the thing is, yes, he is. But can we blame him, right? There's this weird metatextual thing going on where he's being set up, certainly, in that position of like, this is the ultimate best friend that Damon has had. And yet, to every character but Enzo, that is not the case, you know? It's
and
like...
Even if it were the case, I'm like, I take you back to season 1 of the Vampire Diaries.
Yeah.
Where Damon staked and murdered Lexi, Stefan's decades-long best friend, in order to cover up the vampire attacks that he had been committing.
Yeah, and that didn't split them
Stefan
up.
forgave him for that. Like 1 day later, forgave him.
So who are you, guy who he spent 5 years in a prison with? You know?
So honestly, even if Stefan had killed this best friend of Damon's, I'd be like, quite frankly, this is payback. 4 years running.
You know?
Well, I guess 3 years in universe.
Oh, it's just it's so fascinating. Again, to sort of queer the narrative a little bit. Because I am very interested in this kind of idea of like, this is the only aspect in which he can occupy a similar space as Klaus, I feel. Because Klaus and Damon had this like conflict where Klaus was trying to break up this bond between Stefan and Damon from the Stefan end of things, right? You'll recall in season 3 when he manages to enslave Stefan, but in Klaus's mind obviously is like my bestie, my love, Stefan. And there was this aspect of Damon, I'm a better brother to him than you could ever be. With me, he can be his full self, he can embrace his darkest nature. This is my most loyal friend, subject. And this is a similar dynamic happening from the Enzo end, where Enzo's having a conflict with Stefan. And it's like, you, this goody-goody, this brother of Damon's who's like holding him back, who's far too soft for his tastes and for my tastes. I'm a better friend to him than you could ever be. But also at the same time, the kind of queer thread is still with Stefan. I found so fascinating. Where like it's Klaus and Stefan as these like bosom pals, but it's like Klaus is obviously in love with Stefan. On this end, Enzo is genuinely in like a forged friendship with Damon. The weird like kind of homoerotic dynamic is with Stefan in this conflict.
He really is alt Klaus, now that you mention it. From the flirting with Caroline, who is not interested.
Not interested at all.
Him being retconned into someone's backstory as this really pivotal character in the journey that they've had through vampirism. I guess that in the same way that Klaus was, as you say, he was all like, oh, Stefan, let me help you give into your darker side. I'm not Lexi. I'm gonna embrace the other aspect of you. Enzo is now like, Damon, let me lead you to your dark side that we're gonna pretend didn't already
that didn't already exist. That's the thing. It's like the corruption arc doesn't necessarily work because there's nothing to corrupt. Damon's already that guy. It's So bizarre.
Which now makes me think that wouldn't it have been better if instead, if we're gonna make this a reflection of Stefan's backstory, where we've got the Sage and the Lexi, wouldn't it have been better for Enzo to
have been
the light?
the light on this side? Yeah, and the flip of the gender too works really well there, where it's like Sage and Enzo on this side, and then Lexi and Klaus on this side. Yeah. I see it.
And I'd be far more interested and willing to accept Damon being redeemed and saved by this platonic friendship than Elena constantly needing to be the thing that redeems him, because it clearly doesn't work.
Yeah.
Elena is never able to make Damon a good person for more than like 3 episodes per season.
No, she just kind of
let
takes him
Enzo
as
have
he
a go.
is, which I guess in itself is like, great lesson to take your partner, warts and all. But when the warts are like mass murder and wanton slaughter, especially of like people you care about, I think maybe some pause.
If we had followed the trajectory of Enzo being like, Damon, you're a horrible person, and then he sticks around
and it's like, I'm not giving up on you.
Yeah, instead of being the enabler, he's the person who's like, let me see if I can salvage something of the person that I believed it was worth having a friendship with. It was worth sacrificing myself to save. That would have been so much more interesting to me, because ultimately, where does Damon's friendship with Enzo go?
Oh, nowhere. I'll tell you that for free. And there's gonna be a lot of nothing in that department going beyond this season. So that would have been far more interesting. And then in that vein, he becomes actually ingratiated in the Mystic Falls gang, because Stefan and Elena are invested in Damon's future and Damon's like soul being preserved or whatever.
And given where Enzo ends up with other friends of Damon's in the future of
I
this
would
show,
be much more willing to entertain that if that had been the case, because even that dynamic in the future would make more sense to me.
Exactly.
Between the 3 of those characters. The only difference is this whole vibe with Stefan, which is kind of fun, wouldn't really exist, because it's like, maybe they'd be at loggerheads at first, but when Stefan realizes Enzo just wants the best for Damon too, they might become like interesting friends. The homoeroticism is purely in the antagonism. It's purely in the Enzo surrounding them with petrol, holding out a lighter and going, shall we burn you and I both? It's so like fascinating. Stefan calls Bonnie to tell her Enzo is dead and probably coming her way, because Bonnie's the anchor at this point, and tells her that we can't let Damon know. And she's like, I understand. It's all our jobs to keep him coddled. That's the one good thing that Enzo I champion, is that he said that one thing of like, we need to stop coddling Damon. This is embarrassing. This is just as Enzo's spirit arrives at her, and she's hanging out with Jeremy at this point, and he's like, what's going on?
Oh no.
Yeah.
Again?
Constantly a specter over their relationship, Enzo. I hate it.
Maybe the thread was always there.
I refuse. Bonnie's like, oh, just someone passing through to the other side, maybe a werewolf or something. And Enzo's like, go on, keep your little secret. You'll see me again. Have I mentioned how good I am at revenge? And it's like, at this moment...
Taylor Swift.
One... there's nothing I do. Absolutely, Enzo is a what's that album?
Speak Now.
Speak Now. Enzo's a Speak Now girly for sure. Even the song Speak Now, don't say yes, run away now. I'm curious as to what his thoughts were about revenge, because he didn't know the other side was falling apart at that point. It's honestly kind of luck of the draw for him.
It doesn't even fall apart until Marcos is pulled back through it. It's still pretty stable at that point.
No, Marcos is back at this point, because remember, he and Marcos have
okay.
spoken. But he's not aware of the metaphysics
yes.
of that. So he's just convinced himself, I'll get revenge somehow.
I guess he was just planning on haunting her, I suppose, since you can hang around the anchor if you want.
I guess, yeah. But he seemed to, I don't know. The point is, he does get revenge, because he starts haunting the MFG in the next episode. He's only able to do this because the other side is falling apart for traveler reasons that do not matter right now. They are at Caroline's dad's lake house. They're hiding Stefan and Elena from the travelers. They're having that awkward night where Damon and Caroline think that Stelena has hooked up, but really they're just hiding that Enzo's dead. So Enzo just kind of jumps around for that first act, kind of making angry quips in the background that nobody can hear, cursing at people who are not aware of his presence. And then I think when he's really angry, he discovers he like knocks over a lamp or something, or he breaks a light, and he discovers that he's able to interact with the physical world if he's emotional enough. Thanks to this, he's able to kidnap Luke, who's outside the lake house running a cloaking spell on it. He creeps on Elena while she's taking a bath before pushing her underwater in an attempt to drown her. He then sets up a gas leak in the lake house to blow everybody inside up. Just by the by, while they're all looking for Luke, Damon chews out Stefan, saying that he's upset that he killed Enzo, but he's more pissed that they lied to him. And most of all, he's pissed that Stefan didn't kill him months ago. Because if the roles were reversed, he would have absolutely done so. Which is crazy.
What does that even mean?
This is his best friend.
I mean, yes, I do believe that at the first kind of inconvenience, Damon would definitely have killed Stefan's best friend. He did it to Lexi, and that's kind of just because she was there.
Yeah, she wasn't even causing any problem. She was a means to an end. He's like, if Enzo had done the shit that he was doing on your end of things, I would have killed him.
I'm amazed that Damon would say, I'm upset because you lied about it. As if to be like, if you'd been honest and glib about it the way I was when I murdered Lexi in front of you,
I would have been fine. This would have been all grand. Enzo, this is your best friend. Seek better, please. At this point, I'm invested in your future and your well-being. Find better friends. No one in Mystic Falls, though. They do not like you. When they find Luke, Enzo stabs Damon through the gut and then lights the place on fire. But Damon promises to find a way to bring him back to life if he stops like haunting them. And I'm like, if Enzo wants to live so damn bad, why did he pull himself off of Stefan? Because in this whole revenge plot, he's like allayed by a promise that, okay, we'll bring you back to life. We'll find a way to get you back, which Damon makes having no certainty of that. But it's like, oh, I guess maybe now that you're on the other side, the humanity switches back on and you're like, damn, actually, wait, I love life. So
the humanity switch was making him more depressed?
Which is like, what is the point then? It's supposed to keep you from being depressed. What is the switch? When you get prescribed a medication and it absolutely does not work.
Perhaps. Maybe Enzo's brain chemistry is different and he's the only vampire we see for whom the humanity switch just makes it worse.
So, they promise to bring him back. Next episode, this is the penultimate episode, Enzo's now bothering Bonnie, who is the only one that can hear him on a normal day because she's the anchor, as you said. She comes to tell Damon, fulfill your promise to Enzo so he can leave me the hell alone. And Damon makes bringing Enzo back to life her problem. Says, okay, do you hear me, Enzo? Bonnie's gonna bring you back. There, problem solved. I've delegated. Bonnie, however, has not told anybody that with the other side collapsing, it is taking her with it as the anchor. Enzo figures this out from like observing her interactions on the other side and starts harassing her because that means she does not have a way for him to come back to the physical world. She's like, accepted, buddy. This is what it is. And Enzo goes on this whole tirade about how he spent decades in Augustine suffering at the hands of madmen and he survived that when he shouldn't have. So he'll accept this when it's done. Which, you know, I can respect. It's built up a sense of determination and of resilience.
Well, I mean, Enzo, you survived because you were a lab rat that they were actively keeping alive.
Yeah, that's fair. I guess he's saying without, like, I guess committing suicide, which can you as a vampire... I guess you could rip your own heart out.
I guess you could.
Yeah. Locked in a cell that has like no sunlight coming in. That feels like the one way you could maybe do it. I guess that's what he's saying. That like he didn't throw in the towel, so to speak.
Fair.
So Bonnie's like, all right, good for you, dude. Let me pick up this box that you slapped out of my hands. Because he shows up all angry and like knocks a bunch of shit out of Bonnie's hands. And it's like, can you just... I'm just trying to go about my last week on this earth. Later, the travelers set off the anti-magic spell that comes to cover all of Mystic Falls, so everyone has to leave town. Bonnie figures out a way all on her own to get the people on the other side back to the physical world before it collapses. She tells Enzo to find this traveler that dies at the beginning of this episode who like kind of liked them, so she was like, maybe we can get the spell from her. The spell that they use to bring Marcos back to life, like fully body and spirit manifest by crossing the anchor. He does find that traveler spirit, she gets sucked up by the darkness before she can tell him the spell. And so they lose their one lead. In the finale, Enzo somehow convinces Silas to come and help them. I guess promising him that they'll bring him across back to the physical world as well, because he's like trapped on the other side, separated from Amara. Silas teaches Bonnie the spell. She lets him get sucked up by the darkness. As we know, bygones be bygones. And when Bonnie's finally able to do the spell, Enzo is the first one to go through Bonnie, because he's not waiting for anybody to show up. He crosses through into the physical world and he leaves. And that's the end of the season for Enzo. Takeaways at the end of season 5.
Frankly, smarter than Elena, who gave Bonnie more work to do by insisting on dying with Damon when she didn't need to.
Not even waiting for Damon, who has proven to be a liability. Got a second chance at life. No one in town likes him or cares for him. Maybe leave town, right? And go live out life in the world as an immortal vampire.
Oh, but you know no one in this show ever leaves this town.
Oh, the vortex of Western Virginia.
Even when the town is uninhabitable by vampires.
Nobody
they
can
linger
be there.
on the periphery.
They are trapped in the orbit of a world in which they cannot live. So, season 6. What's happening at the beginning of season 6? Nobody can be in Mystic Falls anymore.
Damon and Bonnie are presumed dead.
Elena's on drugs.
True.
Alaric is back.
He's teaching at Whitmore again. Caroline has dropped out. Stefan is off, presumably looking for a way to bring Damon back. Matt's still in town because he's human. And Tyler is also still in town because he's an untriggered werewolf and he's fine. As is Jeremy. But Jeremy's in a funk.
Oh yeah, the bros are in town.
Yeah.
Jeremy is slutting it up because he's in mourning.
As he should. Right. Mm-hmm. And Tyler's in... Oh no, Tyler's at Whitmore. Tyler's going to college now, which wild post his breakup with Caroline, that's when it's like, oh, now let me go to college, but that's whatever.
Oh, he's now going to college? I thought he was in that program with Matt.
No, he specifically doesn't join the program with Matt because he's like, I've got anger issues. I can't be like in a cop situation.
Wow. So now
Tyler recognized.
You go to college.
So now he's in college and he's flirting with Liv. So, you know, I do think if they hadn't shot Tyraline or Forward, as I found out their ship name is.
I have told you this.
Oh, you have told me this. You have. That's true. I feel like that would have been a rekindling for them. But also by then, you know, she was already crushing on Stefan. So probably not. All right. We're not talking about them.
My ship sunk in the middle of the night. Shot down with nuclear
cannons,
missiles launched by a submarine for the sake of a ship that never even left its own harbor.
For the sake of a ship that wasn't even built. For the sake of a couple planks that was sitting at the dock. No, I'm with you in that, certainly. I hated it. But, you know, we'll talk about that another day. Right now, we're talking about Enzo showing up in the second episode of season because he's not in the first one. So Caroline has learned from Rick that after 3 months of searching, pretty much everyone has given up trying to get Damon and Bonnie back. Everyone except Lorenzo St. John, that is, who is still inexplicably here.
Who suddenly cares so much.
Yeah, it's like
about saving
Damon,
the man who left him to die, and by all rights he should believe is dead and has moved on, found peace, or gone to hell.
Is not like the Mystic Falls gang, right? Who have experience with this sort of shit, where they're like, we've been dealing with these supernatural problems consistently. More often than not, there's a loophole. He has been imprisoned for 70 years, and he just got out. And he's like, certainly there's a way. Knowing nothing about magic, right? But in this 3 months, he has apparently figured out there's gotta be a way. We cut to him in a hotel back room, seducing a witch, I guess, who tells him about a coven in Oregon who found a way to communicate with their ancestors just before the other side went away. Don't know what that means. Caroline then finds him because Rick has told her where he's off to. And he's like, hello, gorgeous, which he did at the end of season 5 when he walked back into the real world. So you have to go, are we still trying to set this up?
Yes, we're still doing this. maybe in their minds, they were toying with the idea of, if we're gonna go the Steroline route, maybe a love triangle with Enzo, Caroline, and Stefan.
A la Stelena and Delena, yeah, of course. They would assume people enjoy that because of the good response they got from the original toxic love triangle. The thing is, I don't care about that shit. So this pissed me off. It's like, really? Okay. I will say this. I like Enzo and Caroline as like an odd couple, like as a pair of buddies, like if they're in a buddy cop movie, you know, because they have good banter and they're vastly different people. So that is a dynamic I enjoy.
If he wasn't flirting with her every 5 minutes, because I'm like, CW, I know you. Nobody flirts for fun. People flirt for profit in your show.
The only thing that messes up this dynamic is that Enzo is constantly flirting to no avail. And it's like, if this was banter in the sense of we're vastly different people, we see the world differently, and so we don't get along, I think that would be far more fun. But, you know, whom's to mind? Instead of taking Caroline to where that lead is, he takes Caroline to Savannah, Georgia, where Stefan has apparently been living with his girlfriend, Ivy. For context, Stefan has not responded to Caroline's correspondence for the last 3 months, which sucks, obviously.
Oh, yeah. This is that weird era where Enzo is suddenly... well, we'll get to it.
Yeah. And honestly, where Stefan is like wildly out of character. They explain it later why he was doing all of this, but I'm still like, this just doesn't feel like something he would do, especially to Caroline. But, you know, it's the story, so we go with it. There's this incredibly awkward dinner where Enzo has nothing to do but poke the bear because he's decided Stefan is now his worst enemy.
And that he just really disapproves of how Stefan has chosen to live his life.
Right.
Not only with regard to giving up on Damon, quote unquote, but also with how dare you treat Caroline the way you treated her.
Caroline, my beloved, my best friend Caroline, how dare you treat her this way? So at some point he stabs Stefan through the hand with a fork, and Caroline has to compel Ivy to go elsewhere with her and not freak out over everything, whatever, do some damage control. Enzo calls Stefan a coward for giving up on his brother. They end up in a fight, as they often do. Enzo stabs Stefan in the neck with a knife, and then Stefan throws him against the table and then snaps his neck. At some point in between scenes, Enzo finally gets up. We only see him sort of going back to the car to find Caroline already waiting for him because she's like, we need to go. And she is crying because she's just had a fight with Stefan. Plus, she's gotten a call from Elena, who's just erased a bunch of her memories. It's an emotional night for Caroline. Good old Enzo sees this. He gets all angry. He then goes back into the house, Stefan's house, and grabs Ivy while Stefan is watching and snaps her neck. And he tells Stefan that he's got a girl out there crying over him, and Enzo's trying to figure out why Caroline's crying over him because he doesn't see much worth caring about. Which is like, okay. And then he says, Damon once told Stefan he promised him an eternity of misery, and Enzo didn't know what his brother could have done to inspire so much hatred. But now he gets it. Stefan isn't a brother to Damon. Brothers don't give up. So anytime he sees Stefan doing so, he's gonna make him pay. Now, we're going to start with one half of the problem here, because there's two halves to this problem. There's an element of this whole situation that unfolds here that's supposed to be like romantic. I don't know. There's a facet within the enemies to lovers, like family of tropes, where there's a moment where the guy finds the girl, because enemies to lovers is almost always heterosexual. So that's kind of, it's like ingrained in the dynamic. But the guy finds the girl like wounded or emotional, and all the like conflict they've had over the story disappears in that instant. And he very dramatically asks, who did this to you? Right? Are you familiar with that, Fadzai?
I am. I didn't know it was specifically enemies to lovers, but I have seen that kind of a thing happen many times.
It's typically in that dynamic.
I usually see it with someone who is the bad boy. Someone
Right.
who in many other instances would be an asshole to you himself.
Right.
But now that somebody else has hurt you,
Yes.
it's what is I just cringed.
What?
I remember
What happened? What happened?
I remembered a meme.
Oh no.
A meme that millennial girlies used to love back in the early 10s.
Oh, no.
And it was this image of a guy with his arms wrapped around a petite little girl. And the caption was, I want a man who I can run to with tears in my eyes. And the first thing he says is, whose ass am I kicking, baby?
Yep. It's exactly that.
I hated it.
So it's exactly that energy of like this person who has otherwise been largely awful or irksome to you. All that goes away and he's like, who did this to you? And it's supposed to be like the first turning point of like heated romance. So the setup here is that Enzo now is this knight for Caroline in this moment. The thing is, it's not actually about Caroline, right? Or at least the bulk of the problem is not about Caroline. He hates Stefan for whatever reason. They've already had their like conflict going on since the previous season. Last season it was because he thought Stefan was too good, and now it's because he thinks Stefan is too bad. So it's never super clear why Enzo is so fixated on Stefan. There is always just some reason.
Stefan Salvatore, you drive these boys wild.
It drives them crazy.
You are their awakening. They don't know how to deal with it. And then they drag Caroline Forbes into it as a no-homo buffer.
Yep.
So that they feel secure in themselves.
That's exactly it, right? It needs to be about a girl because other than that, what is this? Crazy. So he was looking for an opportunity to like pick a fight with Stefan. And the fact that he kills Ivy to get this point across, to get back at Stefan, is like, Caroline isn't Elena. She would not see what Enzo has done here as like, oh, he did this because he cares about me. It's okay that he's a monster. There's good in him. Caroline is not that bitch.
Elena catching strays, and they are deserved strays.
It's season 5. They're deserved. Caroline, for the bulk of her encounters with Klaus, even in the moments in which she was like mildly infatuated by him, would constantly reiterate that like, Klaus is a monster. Yes, there's this very sad kind of tragic bit to his backstory. Ultimately, he has harmed me and my friends so much. Other than what happens in season 5, that was the beat. So like, Caroline's not going to look at this and be like, what she said to him about Maggie, right? If after he kills Tom Avery, she's like, if Maggie's anything like me, she's lost all respect for you. Caroline is not that girl. On top of that, the idea that Stefan Salvatore hasn't done enough by Damon, hasn't been a good enough brother to him, the idea that someone who knew Damon for like 5 years tops, coming to Stefan, who's been carrying Damon on his back for over a century and a half, and saying, you better shape up, boy, because you're not meeting my standards of loyalty to your brother, is ludicrous to me. Also, why not search for him yourself? You had a lead about where Damon might have gone to the other side. You chose not to follow that lead up and to go to where Stefan was because you'd found that out. And I'll tell you now, Enzo does not follow up that lead at any point over the first arc of the season before they find Damon. This is the last you will see of Enzo making any attempt to locate his best friend who he is assaulting Stefan over. So what is this?
Also, when he came back through Bonnie and exited the other side, did he not just walk away and leave? Did he hang around and wait for Damon? Because
he walks past Caroline and says, hello, gorgeous, and keeps walking out of the scene. So unless he walked just 10 meters away and then turned around and stood, and they just didn't show it for the scene, I don't know.
Wild. Also, wild to drag poor Ivy into this, who has done nothing to no one.
Right.
Who is just an object for you to use to piss off Stefan by murdering her. Especially when you're gonna frame it as you defending Caroline's honor. Caroline, who, one of the first things Caroline says to Enzo when she meets him and he's like, you know, egging her on to murder poor Tom Avery, she says, hi, I'm Caroline Forbes, and I'm a good vampire that doesn't just go around killing people. So, like, Enzo.
So it's, although, okay, there are 2 blips in there. Actually, scratch that. There are 14 blips in there.
All right.
That we'll have to address at some point.
Well.
12 of them weren't her fault.
One of... So 12 of them were a package deal where she, in the heat of the moment, saved her friend by knifing one person and then killed that person plus 11 others.
11 of her closest friends.
That was the exact line. She just happened to bring the exact amount that Silas needed.
I roll deep. I ride with my posse, and my posse is a convenient sacrifice for expression.
But also, I guess the first kill will chalk that up to vampire bloodlust.
She freshly a vampire, yeah.
Yeah. Who are 13 and 14?
So that's 12. 13 is Carter,
13.
as you're saying.
Okay, 13 is Carter. So
14 is the cancer patient who she experiments on when she wants to give her mother vampire blood.
Oh,
To be fair, and this is an awful thing to say, he was dying. So she did put him in agonizing torment for about a day. He was a terminal patient.
Yes, she did believe that the alternative was that he was just going to die anyway. Did he consent to being a part of medical science?
Nope.
No, but
No, he did not. And he was a black man, which...
I've seen characters in this show do far worse for far less.
Certainly.
A desperate girl trying to save her one remaining parent. I understand that she was not acting like her best self.
And regardless, in this argument, we're talking about it's not about the impact. In a rare case, it's not about the impact. It's about the intent, right?
Yeah.
It's that Caroline does not want to be a vampire that just kills people and does not choose that more often than not. As opposed to this instance in which Enzo just snaps a total stranger and Stefan's girlfriend of multiple months to prove a point. Not even for any genuine, I need to save someone's life. It's for some sort of arguable purpose. No, just to piss Stefan off.
Oof.
So, Enzo, episode 3, welcome to paradise. This is the episode where they have that encounter in the woods, Stefan and Enzo. We talked about it in the Killer Bite about Trip Cook. Enzo is carrying ice for Caroline's lake party, because she has a lake party happening outside Mystic Falls. I assume he hasn't told her about Ivy, because I don't know why she would, just be entertaining him in that respect. Stefan finds him and throws a stake at him. Enzo grabs it and throws it at the random community protection squad guy, Jay, one of Trip Cook's proteges, who was just there with a shotgun. Enzo says that guy was gonna kill Stefan, but looking back, he is clearly after Enzo. So, Stefan's not been in town for 3 months. Enzo has been in a nearby diner, feeding on people, and Trip is aware of him. Stefan picks up the shotgun and cocks it. He's ready to shoot Enzo, because obviously. Enzo's like, are you kidding? I just saved your life. And it's like, what? Where do you think we are? And this will go on forever, is that Enzo constantly has delusions that he is friends or better friends with people than they actually are. Because he's convinced in this moment he threw a stake at community protection squad guy and killed him. Stefan should appreciate this. Caroline vamp runs in the way of the shotgun. When she asks Stefan what Enzo's doing, Stefan says, ask your friend Enzo, and then leaves. We do not see that conversation, but later, when it's dark out, we see Enzo drop Jay's body into Tyler's truck, expecting him to lend it to him for some quick disposal. Just be the dubs. Squad Boy was Matt's friend, and in that scene he finds out that his friend has been killed by Enzo and just has to take it. So but
the whole time this was happening, I was just thinking, Enzo, why are you here?
Why are you
still here? Why are you acting like you've been here? It's very much Enzo for a long time in this show, maybe even until the very last season, or at least the end of season 7. When he's with the Mystic Falls gang, he's very much that meme of, bro thinks he's on the team. No.
Exactly. He's convinced he's part of the group, and every interaction he has with them is people going, what do you want? Why have you done this? Your friend Damon is not here. Please leave us alone. And it's like blinders, earmuffs. Nothing's getting through to him. And it would be a different situation if it was he was actually proving to be an ally to them. But the thing is that he just kind of rocks up and acts as though there is an established friendship apropos of nothing. And then gets upset when people don't reciprocate. And that's what sits wrong with me, you know?
He was really trying to retcon himself in to the group dynamic. It just wasn't working.
He got a glimpse at the script and tried to make some edits. They're fighting him on it. At the end is the scene at the diner where he gets vervained by Trip Cook. Go back to the Trip episode. It's a lot of fun. Trip Cook's been watching him and says, listen, I can't let you keep feeding on the wait staff here. Enzo resists because he's built up a tolerance to vervain from his time in Augustine. But Stefan comes into the diner and shoots him in the back. Next episode, Enzo very briefly appears, Trip, who is sort of grooming Matt to become one of his squad boys, takes him to a secret shed where we find he's got Enzo chained up and has been interrogating him to give up any of his vampire friends. And in the episode after that, we are with Matt giving Enzo his blood rations in the shed. When Enzo tries to convince Matt to let him go, Matt says, "Listen, if Stefan turned you in to Trip Cook, means you probably deserved it." This man says, "When did Stefan's moral compass become the new true north?" Suggesting that because Stefan left town to go start a new life while everyone thought he was still looking for Damon, he is now evil. A fascinating gambit from Enzo St. John, who just killed 2 different humans.
Enzo, didn't you enter this show telling Damon that murdering everyone who was currently a part of the Augustine Society was not enough, and then nodding with approval when he told you he would haunt this family of relatively innocent people for generations to come, murdering most of them, traumatizing the leftovers, and rinsing and repeating? Were you not the one who got him to murder Aaron because, I don't know, reasons? Now, because you're upset with Stefan, this is why I'm saying Enzo is that person going on social media
It's
being
me,
like,
right?
woe is me,
Yes.
everyone hates
Woe is
me,
me.
you can't trust people. There's one person you're upset with, Enzo, and you're going to pretend like you have a problem with the way the world works. No. You're mad at Stefan because of ABC. Now you're going to pretend that fundamentally, morally, ideologically...
Stefan is evil now because he turned me in. After I killed his girlfriend, but don't worry about that. He deserved that. Then he turned me in? Wild, this man. He then says he's going to rat out all the MFG vampires, the same way he did Ivy. Oh, by the way, he didn't just kill Ivy, he turned Ivy into a vampire and then sold her out to Trip. So the mental gymnastics going on here is just really fascinating to me. So Matt then has to go and rally the troops to bust Enzo out so he doesn't sell any more of them out. They do eventually rescue Enzo and Damon, who also gets captured by the squad boys. This is when they block off the exits, or rather the entrances to Mystic Falls, and they catch Trip and his van of death by the border. There's a crash, people almost die, it's a whole thing. In the next episode, Enzo's free now, and again, he's just kind of hanging around. He's the one to point out that though they got Trip locked up now, his squad boys are still out there acting on his orders. So Stefan tells Enzo, you've got 2 hours, get the names and locations of all of Trip's people. But by the time Enzo manages to do that, the squad boys have already kidnapped Sheriff Forbes. So there needs to be a hostage exchange. They trade Liz Forbes for Trip Cook. And when they do so, they do it across the Mystic Falls border so that it can all be safe and whatever. When Trip crosses the anti-magic border going into Mystic Falls, his throat gets all gashed and he collapses and dies. Because as it turns out, Enzo in those 2 hours has killed and turned Trip Cook into a vampire while everyone was gone. So that he would die in revenge.
Was he a full vampire or was he in transition? Would he not have remembered
Actually, I
feeding
don't know. He
and
didn't
completing?
need to be.
Yeah, I guess he would have just been in transition, not realizing he'd woken up after death.
But he certainly fed him blood and killed him. And then he woke up.
Maybe it's a sign of how I feel about Trip. I found that kind of funny. I was like, you gagged me
No,
there.
it was hilarious.
You ate that one thing.
It was kind of hilarious. And I loved it. I'm thinking about like Trip. He was doing a lot of... Well, Trip is complex. Again, go back to the Trip episode. We have some interesting discussions about him. But for the MFG, definitely an enemy.
Yes. But then, for the MFG, an enemy is just, a season and a half away from being an ally.
Exactly. So maybe they're going to turn him? Who knows?
The problem is Enzo is just trying to speed run that progress. He's trying to retcon himself into the group like Dawn Summers.
I actually was
in
an
Buffy
antagonist
season 5.
Seasons ago. Season 5 was the ally turn, guys. I promise.
He's like, I can be the key. I was here all along. Enzo's just like, remember in the pilot episode when I was standing behind Damon when he said, hello, brother?
I was with him the whole time. Remember, I'm in pictures? I promise. Guys, here's my apartment full of stuff. He snuck in to Mystic Falls and secretly bought up an apartment.
It's like, wow, it was crazy when Elijah betrayed us at the end of Klaus's sacrifice, guys.
Guys, that
I
was
really
so
thought he was
well.
going to help us.
The originals? Oh, remember when we were dealing with them? So, another fun thing that happens this episode before the exchange is that Enzo's the one to point out that Caroline is so insistent on hating Stefan because she's actually in love with Stefan. So, one good thing he does before he bows out of that weird dynamic. I appreciate that, Enzo.
He's the one to be like, I can see that you guys are in love. You just haven't figured it out yet.
Yes!
Thanks, Enzo. Couldn't have done it without you.
Oh, I can't wait for the Caroline episode. Or is this gonna be a fight? It's gonna be our first boxing match.
I mean, I'm not blaming Enzo for Steroline. I'm just saying, are we really gonna say that if not for him, we wouldn't have figured out as soon as we did that this is where we were heading?
I think for some of us, we'd figured it out long before. That was for Stefan's benefit, which again, honestly, he's bowing out on the Stefan side of things because, well, no, let me not speak too soon. He certainly has not bowed out yet.
Oh no, so Enzo is the friend of the story going, dude, you two are clearly in love with each other. How have you not figured that out yet? I hate it even more.
Oh, he's the James Marsden. He's the James Marsden in the rom-com being like, I'm the other guy and I just know your true soulmate is Stefan. Except I do not want to put Enzo and any character James Marsden has played in the same boat. He doesn't deserve that. Enzo comes back 2 episodes later. He does that very often, skips an episode because truly they don't know where to put him. It's an episode called I Alone, which is very fitting for Enzo St. John.
The title of his spin-off series.
His memoirs, his adaptation. Okay. I have to take a breath for this one. Fadzai, I'm going to caution you to take a breath too.
Okay.
It's finally time to talk about Sarah.
Oh.
We've been putting it off for most of this season of the show.
I buried that memory. I forgot about her. I'm going to be honest.
Kept saying, don't worry about Sarah. We'll talk about Sarah. Don't worry about it. We are here to talk about Sarah today because this is the only context in which she matters. So, we've mentioned Sarah briefly before. She got bitten by Elena in the first episode, and after that, she sort of ran into Mystic Falls out of fear, and she got help from Matt and the sheriff, but her compulsion, because she's inside the anti-magic border, wore off. So she knows vaguely that something weird is going on. She just remembers some girl bit her and she looked a little bit weird. Since then, she's just sort of been in Mystic Falls. She's hooking up with Jeremy because, he's there. But that fizzles out because Matt does not trust her. So she backs off. She goes, all right, I'm gonna leave. But don't worry, I have family in town anyways. That's the reason I'm here to begin with. So I'm just going to kick it with them. I'm looking for Stefan Salvatore. Do you know him? And it's like, oh, okay. What does that mean? Family how? Because as we know, Stefan and Damon are vampires and did not procreate. At least up until this point, we think, did not procreate. And there is Zach, but we hadn't heard anything about Zach.
I'm sorry. You said Zach. And my mind went black?
It's pronounced Zach, actually. You must be...
Which, I mean, we could say when we see Zach's wife.
Yes! Yes! And then you see his child and you're like, black? Okay. Despite his better judgment, Matt has been keeping up with Sarah and eventually decides to break to her that, hey, vampires are real. You're not crazy. And Stefan is around, actually, and I can introduce you to him. So, in this episode, I Alone, Matt is with Sarah at a diner, waiting for Stefan to arrive. And Enzo, who's been eavesdropping from the counter in the diner, comes around. And he tells Sarah that Matt and Stefan are boring company and she'd be better off hanging out with him. And she rolls her eyes, but takes his hand when he offers it, like he introduces himself. He loves to offer a hand. He's a London-timey gentleman, late 18th century. As she takes his hand to hold it as good to meet you, Matt says, yeah, he's the guy who killed Trip Cook. And Sarah immediately recoils. And Enzo's like, for the record, he tried to kill me first. Then he turns to Matt and says, you're a terrible wingman. Again, delusion.
Delusion!
Delusions! Matt tells him to leave. Enzo says, or what? and Matt makes some empty threat that he could never follow up on, but Stefan shows up and backs it up. So, fortunate timing in that. Enzo says brutish to make threats in front of impressionable family. And Stefan's like, what are you talking about? And Miss Girl stands up and says, he's talking about me. I'm Zach and Gail's daughter, Sarah. And it's like this huge drop because we know Zach, we don't know Gail, but this is apparently, what's the connection there? Great grandniece? No, great grandniece.
I don't know how many greats it would be, but some form of great grand niece. I mean, we don't really know how old Stefan and Damon's half brother even was.
Right, exactly, because we never met him.
Damon just vaguely says, after the war, our dad knocked up one of the maids. And I'm like, yeah, but your dad like died the night you became vampires. So this maid
so
must
how
have...
was that after the war?
She was either already pregnant.
You were still a Confederate soldier.
She was pregnant. All the Salvatore men were dead. And she was like, I'm going to get my coin because I'm carrying a Salvatore child.
And you know what? To Stefan's credit, he's like, I recognize you, my Salvatore kin. I bring you in. And he brings in nephew Uncle Zach.
There we go.
When we get back to them, Stefan and Sarah are talking at a table in this diner, while Enzo and Matt are at the counter now. Enzo's throwing insults at Matt, and Matt's like, everybody hates you. Meanwhile, Enzo's eavesdropping on the conversation over there. And then Stefan orders 2 milkshakes from a server and tells Sarah, it's a family tradition. And she's like, yeah, I'm all about that. Let's go.
Yeah, he's so smart.
Stefan's on top of this shit. The server goes to the machine and switches it on, and it starts making a loud, whirring, whizzing sound. And their conversation is then muffled from Enzo. And he tells Sarah to get up and walk out with him, acting like nothing's wrong, which shouldn't be too hard because he knows she's lying. And it's like, whoop.
Stefan, you diva.
Damn, girl. He's dragging you for full. Stand up.
Stefan
back,
was like,
Sarah.
you a fake ass lying girl, so it should be easy for you to...
con artist. And you can't even lie well. So they both get up and they leave, and Matt runs to them and is like, where are you guys going? And she's like, it's fine, Matt. We're just going to go hang out. I'll call you later, let you know how it goes. And Matt's like, all right, fair enough. After that, Enzo's asking Matt if he really isn't curious what the two of them are off talking about. And Matt's like, he's her family, so that's their business, not mine. Why do you care so much?
Yes, Enzo, why do you care? Why? Maybe Enzo did have a crush on Stefan. I'm like, you are fixated on this man's business. This isn't even about Damon anymore. You claimed it was about Damon.
It isn't. And that's the other thing. Every episode, sometimes within the same episode, the reason, because multiple people ask him, or just like the story asks of him, Enzo, why are you so fixated on this man? Every answer is a different answer from the last one. It changes 4 or 5 times when he explains why he's so focused on Stefan. It's crazy. Matt asks him this, and he says, because I care about the truth. He says, I care about the truth. I care about authenticity. And Matt is like, yeah, or you just hate Stefan. And Enzo's like, I do actually, yes. He abandoned his brother. Enzo and Damon have not spoken once since Damon's come back. By the way, Damon's back. Damon's been back for 3 episodes. They've not even been in the same scene, let alone spoken to each other. He abandoned his brother. Turn me over to a vampire hunter. This was after Enzo attacked Stefan in his home and killed his girlfriend. And he hurt the one girl who can honestly do no wrong. Caroline's not a person to Enzo. Caroline's not a person with flaws and a history. She's an object. She's a tabula rasa to project on. Who has no sin, who has no violence, who could not do anything wrong to somebody. And it's like, for that, Stefan, I hate you. It's like, you don't know this girl then. You've never spoken to her about anything real.
No, Enzo's like, no, remember I was there when she transitioned and how I helped her get through it? In season 2?
Remember in season 2 when she killed that guy Carter, who I was also friends with, by the way, and I got over my own emotional trauma to help her through her transition, because I'm a good friend.
You know what it's like? It feels like Enzo is trying and failing to make himself the actual show version of Alex Gilbert.
Yes! I've been thinking about Daniela Labonet this whole time. Alex Gilbert, long lost twin sister of Elena Gilbert. She's been here the whole time, we promise. Enzo says he cares because Stefan does all of that, the things I've listed so far. Abandon his brother, turned Enzo over to a vampire hunter, hurt the one girl who can honestly do no wrong, Caroline, and is still considered a hero while he's stuck being a villain.
You're stuck being the villain because you want to insinuate yourself into this group that does not want you. They barely want the person who is your segue into this group.
Right? You can be a hero anywhere else if you wanted to. You could start fresh, my guy. You don't have to be here.
You could go to New Orleans. Lord knows 3 of the show's biggest villains have been basically redeemed in that show.
In New Orleans.
Now.
And you know what? He's a musician. He would fit in so well in New Orleans as a little guitar-playing vampire. He'd kill it.
Go be part of Marcel's squad. He's always looking for people to join up.
Pretend you're Marcel's best friend. See how he deals with you. Matt is like, well, you kill people. So maybe that might be the issue. And Enzo's like, and what? Stefan doesn't? At least I'm up front with it.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
He's like, at least I have the guts to be honest.
The logic is because I kill people and I revel in it and I'm like, this is vampirism. Take it or leave it. But Stefan is a ripper who sometimes goes off on a bender and will occasionally kill antagonists when he feels he has no choice to protect the people he loves. I am better than him and he is a hypocrite.
I love the delusion. I love the gymnastics. It's so good.
There's a reality TV star called Tiffany Pollard, sometimes known as Tiffany New York.
Beyonce?
In that very same scene you've just quoted, before the Beyonce thing, she says to the woman she's arguing with, she says, you know what? I might be a bitch to the heart, but at least I am not a wolf in sheep's clothing, smiling in all these other girls' faces. I'm a wolf. You see me coming. That's what Enzo is saying here.
Enzo is Tiffany Pollard confirmed.
He's like, you know what? I would like to let
Stefan know that he is a trifling ass bitch, and the shoes he gave me were not what I'd considered to be.
They were old maiden type shoes.
Old maiden type shoes.
Like somebody lied to Stefan several times and told him that he was a hero and a martyr and, you know, this tortured, tragic soul, that he's nothing like that. He's nothing of the sort.
So wild. For whatever reason, Matt is convinced to go with Enzo, right? As he heads off after Stefan and Sarah. To do what? Unclear. Find out the truth, right? Learn the authentic truth, as he says. They don't see or hear the conversation between Stefan and Sarah, but for our benefit, we hear Stefan knows that this is not really Sarah Salvatore, because he knows where Sarah Salvatore is, what university, what major she's doing, that she was adopted right after she was born, because he made sure of it. So Miss Girl over here is actually named Monique, and she apparently met Sarah at sleepaway camp, learned that Sarah had no interest in finding her real family, and then took the opportunity. So that's the tea on that.
How did she find out that Sarah's birth name was Sarah Salvatore?
Couldn't tell you. Certainly Sarah doesn't know, right?
Yeah, she went and researched all of the Sarahs in the region who had been adopted and I'm assuming Sarah knows she's biracial. Who knows? She might not. Often when you don't know who your birth parents are and you're racially ambiguous. Yeah, when racially ambiguous people are orphaned and don't know what their exact heritage is, there isn't really a way to know short of like doing a genetics test, which foster homes are not just offering for free. So
certainly. God, that's rough.
Anyone's guess.
Yeah, anyways, yeah. So yeah, I guess she did some research. She pulled together some.
With the first name Sarah.
And she found the town. She found the family. She found everything. I guess, would she have had her parents say? I can't imagine Stefan would have done an open adoption, because the whole point of that was to protect her from Damon, right?
Yes.
Damon, who is we will then learn, is the one who killed Zach and Gail.
Yes.
So, I don't know.
Well, Zach a couple of years later, I guess, but...
Yes, a couple of years later. He kills Gail way back when, and assumedly Sarah in utero. But then Stefan saves Sarah at the hospital. And then years later kills Zach. So it's like, if Damon knows about this girlie, she's out. Because we can't have a reminder of Damon's worst thing he's ever done. Blah, blah, blah. Anyway. I don't know how Monique found this all out. She's just good at what she does, I guess.
Monique the sleuth.
Monique the sleuth, Monique the con artist. By the time Matt and Enzo get to Stefan and Monique, Stefan has asked her to take off the vervain that Matt has given her so he can compel away Sarah Salvatore from her memory and tell her to leave and never come back. So then she walks past Matt on her way out of scene. Matt's like, hey, what's going on? And she's like, who are you? And then keeps going. And Matt, looking real hurt, looks at Stefan and is like, you compelled her? Why did you do that? And Stefan's like, she's a con artist. She's not actually my family. She showed up lying. Problem solved, you'd think, right? And then Enzo vamp speeds into frame, comes in front of Monique and is like, don't scream or move, love. Compels her. Before holding her hostage, grabs her, turns her around, holds her neck and her head, as he's wont to do, and tries to force Stefan to tell them the whole story. Stefan insists there's no Sarah Salvatore, that baby died in the 90s when Damon killed her mother with her in the womb. Enzo, as per usual, refuses to accept that. And he threatens to kill Monique if Stefan doesn't tell the truth in 5 seconds. Matt makes another empty threat. Stefan keeps quiet this time. And Enzo snaps Monique's neck. And he says, to think all this could have been avoided if you just told the truth. So, there was no other way out of this situation.
I'm like,
except through Stefan telling Enzo the truth he's owed.
Enzo, my guy, the last time Stefan told you the truth about there being no hope of saving Damon, he's given up, he's trying to move on, you murdered his girlfriend in front of him. This feels like...
The time before that, you flipped your humanity and started attacking everybody and then killed yourself. So it seems like every time you get the truth, it doesn't end well for anyone, you know?
Also, once again, why do you care, Enzo?
Why
does any of this have to do with anything? You are bored, Lorenzo St. John.
This is the thing. He has no story. He has nothing outside of this. He needs to be given something to do to justify his place in the story, but it never makes sense, right?
Yeah.
It's never connected to him in any way. Next episode, because that just kind of ends there. Matt, in a surprising bit of cunning, Matt is not the sharpest tool in the shed, bless him. But he tricks Enzo into thinking that he's going to help him find the real Sarah Salvatore. I'd fully forgotten this happened, and I was like, Matt, are you genuinely helping him? Because he makes it seem like he's giving up the location of the real Sarah Salvatore from a diary of Stefan's that he's stolen. And then he hands over the book, and it's empty. And it's actually a trap. And Jeremy comes up in the back and takes him down. They're in like a weird boiler room. It's very strange. This is followed by an equal moment of stupidity, though, in which instead of killing Enzo so that the problem is over, which is what Jeremy says to Matt, Matt decides Enzo needs to suffer for Trip and for Monique, etc., etc.
Oh, no. Matt Donovan in his Gohan moment. I don't know if that reference lands.
Mildly. There's something kicking in the back of my memory from when I watched Dragon Ball.
Gohan, who is like a preteen during the Cell saga and is very powerful at this point, more powerful than you would have expected, is the only person, because Goku is dead and hasn't been brought back to life yet. If he's alive, he's unavailable for some reason. But Gohan is the only person who has been able to have any sort of effect on Perfect Cell when they're fighting him. He manages to damage Perfect Cell, he has him on the brink, and then instead of finishing off this regenerative villain, burning away all the rest of the molecules that make him up, he's like, no, I want to see him suffer. He deserves to be in pain for a few minutes after all the friends of ours he's killed. And it's like, no, you stupid child, kill him. Now, Gohan was like 12 when this happened.
Gohan's
Matt
a child.
Donovan, you are
Right.
21.
Matt Donovan, you're grown and you've had experience with vampire antagonists. You go for the kill. No, he thinks he's a big man now, right? Now that Trip's dead and has left him with this legacy, he takes up Trip's murder van and throws Enzo in the back, and he's going to drive over the Mystic Falls border so Enzo can slowly die and suffer. The thing is, it's not that slow, the death over the anti-magic spell, if we're being honest. It's over in a matter of 10 seconds.
Yeah.
So I don't know what sense of excitement they're garnering from this.
I guess guess I don't know how Matt would know how Enzo had died, but I guess depending on the way you died, it can be slow.
It could be super violent.
Ivy dies instantly because she was turned with a snapped neck. Enzo, I guess, coughed up his lungs with tuberculosis, and that's how he died.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. Still weird, but you know, what are you gonna do? Unfortunately for Matt, on the other side of town, Kai Parker is in the story. Kai Parker, who, if you don't know, is a magic siphon. He is a witch, but he has no connection to nature, and he cannot cast spells of his own. He has to absorb magic from other sources in order to cast magic. And he is in the process of sucking up the entire anti-magic spell that sits over Mystic Falls. So when Matt drives over the border and gets out of the car and opens the bag, Enzo leaps up, having broken free of his restraints, still alive. We truly cut away from that and cut back, and now Matt is inside the van sitting with his arms folded, pouting like a toddler, and Enzo's outside. So he's kind of screwed now.
Oh, Matthew. I love that. I know it's obviously TV and it's the tension, it's the drama, it's the narrative, but I love that those things are happening at the same time as Matt decides to drive this man over the supernatural anti-magic bubble. The bubble
That is when
itself
it
is
disappears.
disappearing. It's very similar to how when Matt himself staked Finn, who was meant to
Yes.
be connected to the other original siblings, and at the same moment Klaus was forcing Bonnie to unlink them.
Not a good couple years for Matt, Matthew Honeycutt, Donovan Maxwell. It's a rough go.
Consistently failing.
In a weird happenstance of their proximity this season, because Matt is now just kind of like the person Enzo's harassing for the season, right? Enzo confesses to Matt that he was right, that he's jealous of Stefan, that Stefan has what Enzo wants: respect, family, girls he doesn't deserve. And he throws it all away and still somehow manages to come out winning. So now Matt's gonna help him deplete every ounce of happiness from Stefan's life.
This makes even less sense than when at the end of season 4, Catherine was like, yeah, I'm gonna go kill Elena because I didn't get my Silas-like immortality, and Elena has everything and she doesn't deserve it.
It's like, girl, what's stopping you from going and finding more? You're immortal. The world is so big. Vampires, man, can never let anything go.
I guess the writers had to give Enzo a reason for why he's so fixated on Stefan. It just wasn't a good one.
It's never a good one. This is even a pivot from the last time they spoke about something kind of similar in the previous episode. It's still a pivot from that. Because he was like, this is a fundamental ideological hatred I have of Stefan. And now it's, I'm jealous. Right? So...
And you know what, actually,
this one's a little bit more honest.
he's so real for that. That is probably the realest reason. He's petty and he's jealous. And so often in life, we see people who are jealous of others trying to justify their hatred with all these things that they imagine are more logical but don't really make sense when you examine them for 5 minutes.
At least he has the integrity to come clean. He has the cognizance to be like, no, let me be honest with myself and you, Matt, since you're kind of here now. I am just jealous of Stefan. That's it. And I'm going to kill him for it. Episode 11, Woke Up with a Monster. Stefan and Caroline go to Duke University. He's trying to give her a bit of a break because they've been taking care of her mom, who is dying of cancer at this point. So he says, we're going to go see a friend of mine. They have an art exhibit at Duke. And then they go. And the friend turns out to be Sarah Nelson, who we can deduce is the actual Sarah Salvatore. Somehow, Enzo is here.
He used the same notes that Monique used, but in reverse.
Snatched it up from where she's been staying and just went, let me track it back. He did follow them here. He makes a point to be like, I followed your trashy red convertible and was tracking you all the way to Duke University, which I think is in a different state. It's in North Carolina.
I love how they always manage to stay in the South in this show, except for when they visit the Gemini Coven or when they go to New York.
My sister in like June of this year was at Duke University, and I was really quick, was like, this is like a very pivotal place in the Vampire Diaries. And she was like, oh yeah. So that was fun.
You'd be like, find Isabel's old dorm, check in on Nora
Find her
Dark.
office. She's got notes in there. She's got weird artifacts we could use. Enzo's followed him all the way here from Mystic Falls. His excuse is, because again, it's a whole new excuse this time why he's here. Damon is unaware that he has some living family left over, and there shouldn't be secrets between family. So he's just gonna go let her know that she has a long-lost uncle, Damon, back in Mystic Falls, and he starts walking off to go approach Sarah Nelson. Stefan stops him, and Enzo's like, what? Why not? We've come all this way. And Stefan explains the whole situation about what happened with Damon, about the fact that he's killed both her parents 15 years apart, and how they had to do a post-mortem C-section to save her, and he wants her to just have a normal life away from all the stuff that they deal with.
So, wait, just stepping a few feet back. Enzo claims his reasoning this time is that there shouldn't be secrets between family. Specifically, he's thinking of Damon when he says this. Enzo, considering what is revealed at the end of this season, I don't know if you should be talking about the Salvatore family and keeping secrets. Because, Okay, Enzo.
To be fair, I don't think he knew her surname at the time.
Okay.
I don't think he would have had the tools to put it together. So I'll give him that one. I'll give him that small break.
The prosecution rests.
It's Hey, listen, I don't knock the hustle, you gotta try. But it is still insane to be involving yourself in this family drama, or pretending to at the very least. It's like, yeah, secrets shouldn't be kept between your family. Whose family, Enzo?
Not yours.
Why are you so invested? You say it's about Damon. Have you spoken to Damon this season? Because I haven't seen it.
Damon killed the lost Salvatore he ran into, who wasn't Stefan.
Anyway, Stefan then says, you know what, Enzo, go ahead and tell Damon if you want, and I'll deal with the fallout, whichever way that goes for me. And then you won't have anything left to obsess over. Which is a mistake to assume, because Enzo will always find something. He then, in not so many words, tells Stefan, well, then I've lost interest, because what's the fun if you don't care? Except later in the episode, after Stefan and most of the patrons at this art show at Duke are gone, Enzo is still standing there. He's now talking to the art director, who doesn't know him. The show is over, nobody's there. Talking to this art director about Sarah's art, talking about, he finds it dark with a morbid undertone, and he's like, maybe it's a family thing. And the art director's like, huh? So Enzo's like, oh yeah, I know her family. Her uncle fourth removed is a bloody sociopath. And you would think, surely, certainly, he must be talking about Damon, right? His best friend, who he still hasn't seen or spoken to, whom just last season he was begging to go on a violent road trip with him to South America, you know? He is talking about Stefan in this moment, calling him a bloody sociopath.
I'm actually not surprised. For someone who was introduced as an aspect of Damon's story, it is remarkable how this season, all of a sudden, Enzo exists to be a thorn in Stefan's side. Frankly, I think he has forgotten about Damon. I think he doesn't even remember why he hates Stefan at this point. If you mention Damon Salvatore, he'd be like, who?
Never heard of him. Stefan's brother. Oh, I see. Now, because again, the reason has changed again. Now he's like, my torture at Tripp's hands is why I want revenge for Stefan.
But wasn't that Matt's fault?
I guess because Stefan turned him in, right? So he's like, all those months ago. Now he's like, yeah, her Uncle Fourth removed is a bloody sociopath, and because of him, I was tortured, which brought up unpleasant memories. So now we're tying it back to Augustine.
Oh, now
Stefan's
now
fault.
it's the PTSD that he's gonna blame.
Right.
Okay, Enzo.
Because you know they love to throw in PTSD with these guys who are just objectively in the wrong. It's just like, no, he's traumatized. I'm sorry. So, in the middle of this speech, right, because he's talking about his carefully plotted revenge. If you remember, he's very good at revenge, he said to Bonnie as he was passing through to the other side. Again, to this art dealer who is very grossed out by everything he's talking about and does not know who he is, he compels her to sell all of Sarah's paintings to him. Why? Which is me reading into it. The only thing he says is, box them up for me. So maybe he took them for free.
Probably. Now I'm thinking about the better than revenge reference. And I'm like, no, truly Enzo is looking at Stefan and going, he's not a saint.
And he's not what you think.
He's an actress.
Oh my god. It's so wild. Enzo, the true Swiftie.
And in his mind, Stefan stealing other people's toys on the playground is Stefan having a relationship with his biological brother, who he knew
his
for
own
decades
family.
before Enzo came into the picture.
And you want to talk about, this will get me assassinated. You want to talk about unending victim complex? I truly just have to, no tea, no shade. I was with Miss Girl, but at a certain point, you've got to move on, right? And I feel like the same could be said for Enzo, right? Like, at what point do you move on? Next episode, The Day I Tried to Live. Enzo, it starts getting so insane. Enzo drags Matt to Duke University, where he shows Matt that's the real Sarah Salvatore. Stefan was lying to you, by the way, so you should actually hate him. Matt is like, why do you even care? And Enzo's like, again, new reason. Enzo says, because Damon thinks he killed Sarah, and instead of absolving him, Stefan's been using Damon's guilt to keep him in check, which is not very brotherly of him.
Lies.
So we're adding another reason to the pile.
Falsehoods.
Slander, libel,
fake
untrue.
news. This would suggest that Damon has been, since 1994, whatever year it was, has just
Feeling
been
any guilt.
beating himself up about this. He's never once mentioned this. Not once. Not to Elena, not to Stefan.
Nope.
No one has ever heard of this child that he killed in utero. B, Stefan's been using it to keep him in check. When? How? When has Stefan ever managed to keep this man in check? Except when they were fighting over the same girl.
When has Stefan ever been able to control this man? This is just, the lie's not even good. It's not.
You know what,
I don't
Enzo?
get it.
Enzo, you are turning into one of my least favorite type of people. The kind of people who are like, ugh, I hate Stefan Salvatore so much. And when you ask them why, they're like, just because he's just, you know, he's
his
fake,
whole vibe
and
is
he's
like,
just, it's his vibe and his energy. I don't like it. And he's just, I don't know how to describe it.
there's just something off about him.
And it's like, you have no reason.
You've barely spoken to him. Have you had a genuine conversation with this man? To be fair, the first 2 times you did try to shake his hand, he was in a mood though. Listen, what are we gonna do? Since then, you've just been actively attacking him.
You don't even know why, because every day it's a new reason.
So, Enzo starts pimping Matt out, right? There's no other way to put it. He starts pimping Matt out to Sarah as the first step in this elaborate plan. To do what? I have no bloody clue. He spawns Matt off on Sarah, being like, just kind of talk her up, you know, try to flirt. Matt tries, it doesn't work, because he's in a stressful situation. I don't blame him. Matt does have game. We know this to be true.
We know. April Young, where you at?
April Young, Nadia Petrova, Rebecca Michelson, we've seen the receipts. We know the Donovan pulls. Nobody's worried about it. When that doesn't work, he takes Matt's jacket, wallet, and phone, and leaves him on a bench, shivering cold. Because I guess it's the middle of fall. And then Sarah now finds him a second time. And Matt tells her, oh, my friend bailed on me with all my stuff. And so she's like, fine, I'll take you to where you can take a bus. Potentially they stop for coffee at some point, because then when Matt comes back to Enzo's car, and Enzo's like, how did your coffee date go? And it's like, oh, okay. I guess they spent a bunch of time together. Matt then asks, what is all of this about? And Enzo says, again, within the same episode we've turned. Enzo says, it was a test to see what kind of person the last living Salvatore is. On a scale of 1 to 10, her purity ranks about a 9.5 based on how she responded to Matt's plight. And once he's done with her, she'll be about a 1.
Oh, yes. I remember this. When all of a sudden, like, the writers kept running out of stuff, and they were like, okay, Enzo's going to be part of a Sarah storyline. But how we will do that is Enzo wants to be the Angelus to her Drusilla.
Right. He thinks he's a classic vampire now.
I found a convent girl being raised by nuns, and I want to destroy her for fun.
He thinks he's the corruption arc for Sarah Salvatore. He says, in his own words, I'm going to insinuate myself into her life, make her do things she'd never dreamed of doing, until she begs me to make her a vampire. Stefan's so eager to protect her, I'm gonna show him just how wrong he is. What are we doing here? Next episode, because that's where it ends. Enzo orchestrates for Sarah to come to Mystic Falls to take photos of the Mystic Grill, which she's like, yeah, this is a weird gig, but also I've never been paid for a gig, so I didn't say no. And Enzo on the phone tells Matt to keep her busy for the time being. He then, after they hang out for a bit, tells Matt to drive her to an isolated road for Enzo to meet up with her. Matt starts to get a little uppity. Matt channeling his uppity African. That's gonna date this episode, but I'm okay with it. He's like, no, I'm tired of all this. Like, I'm not gonna do your dirty work for you. But Enzo has already kidnapped Jeremy for leverage. While they're on the phone, he is pressing his boot onto Jeremy's face so hard that blood is dripping down the sides of his cheeks.
Jeez.
It's so unbelievably violent how Enzo has acted to Jeremy the 3 times they've encountered each other. It's very bizarre. So Matt brings Sarah to the road, because we can't let Jeremy die, of course. It's under this small tunnel that's got a bunch of graffiti, so naturally she's like, ooh, I need to take photos of these. What a candid moment. Matt gets a call from Enzo and is like, where are you? And Enzo's like, oh, I'll be right there in a second. Just take a couple steps to the left. And so Matt like steps to the left a little bit. And then Enzo runs into Matt full speed with his sports car. And Matt rolls over the top of the car, hits the ground, and his face is entirely bloodied. He then comes up after the fact, because Sarah's now beside Matt, like trying to figure out what to do. Is like, oh my god, he looks like he's going to die. Enzo comes up, acting like some bystander who watched the accident happen. He's like, oh goodness, I think he's punctured a lung. It's like, what? Matt, speaking through like blood that's coating his mouth and nose, is looking at Enzo saying, fix it. Sarah's like, are you an EMT? Or like, what's going on here? Enzo's like, not exactly, but I can help. And he tells her she needs to remain calm. What she's about to see is something she's never seen before. He then bites his hand and feeds Matt his blood, healing him. And Sarah has her moment of like, oh my god, what? What's going on? And then Enzo vamp rushes away.
How funny would it have been if she'd been like, oh, you're a vampire. I know those exist.
Give me a second, because you're gonna wish you didn't say that. You're gonna feel that was really like pulled from the ether.
Oh no.
So, next episode called The Downward Spiral. We're in a diner or a cafe. I couldn't tell you where it is. It might be Duke, it might be Whitmore, it might be Mystic Falls. All these places start to blur together because it's all like brown motifs, wooden paneling, the same goddamn bar. This place has 2 levels though, so I'm inclined to believe they're at Whitmore, because the Mystic Grill is just 1 level, and she was already in Mystic Falls, so she can't have gone back to Duke, and then Enzo went to meet her there, you know?
Yeah.
She's on the ground floor, taking pictures of Enzo, who's up on the 2nd floor, like in view of her. She thinks she's being all secretive. He then vamp rushes downstairs until he's right next to her, and is like, oh, we've met before. She's like, yeah, you saved my friend Matt with your blood. And he's like, would you like to join me for tea? So they sit for tea, and Sarah tells him, I've got all these pictures of you and your weird veiny face, and I need to know more about you. Like, what's going on here? And so Enzo starts showing off his vampire skills, and he's like, I'm very fast, and I'm very strong, and I'm very rich. And I'm like, rich how? When did Enzo make money? In like the half a year he's been back in the real world, I guess.
Maybe he had money stashed somewhere before Augustine got him?
From what? He was an orphan who then was in 2 wars and then got snatched up. After which I have to assume he didn't have an estate, right? Because he was abandoned. So it's like whatever money he had might have been taken up by the bank or whatever because he was presumed missing or dead. I guess you just compel some people to give you money. I don't know.
I guess. Or he was just lying.
Yeah, that's true.
Rich in the figurative sense. Like, that's rich.
Sarah's like, rich, strong, fast. You have weird veins coming out of your face. You can heal people with your blood. What are you?
Okay, Bella.
I think this was intentional. And Enzo's like, You want to hear me say it? Fine. I'm a vampire. And Sarah stares at him, her face unchanging. And Enzo's like, didn't you hear me? I'm a vampire. And she's like, oh. And because apparently she knows what vampires are. She just thought there was something more to it.
Oh, wow. So I guess maybe I just remembered that subconsciously.
It's very possible. She's like, yeah, I mean, I know what vampires are. It's just like, I thought it would be more exciting.
Damn, Enzo, you just can't win this season.
He cannot win. And so Caroline then comes by for a little bit. Humanity switches off. Do not worry about it. She invites Enzo to a dance at Whitmore. Oh, yeah. So I guess they're at Whitmore. Yeah, they are at Whitmore for sure. So he does show up for that dance. And Caroline's putting the flirt on again because she literally doesn't care about anything. But Enzo's not into it now because he's like, well, it doesn't matter so much when... Oh, of course he references Stefan in it too. Like, it doesn't matter so much. Because your humanity's off and Stefan's humanity's off, so... Caroline, though, does figure out for him the reason Sarah is, like, not interested in vampires is that Stefan has compelled Sarah to not care about vampires.
Oh, I do remember
So that if someone
this.
ever told her about vampires, she would just be, like, disinterested and, like, move away from the problem. Which is pretty smart.
Yeah, clever.
Bird in a Gilded Cage, episode 17. Enzo finds Caroline again in her no humanity era, and after that encounter goes to Rick, who I also don't think he's interacted with once this season. There must have been some off-screen conversation between the two of them while he was looking for Damon, right? But other than that, these two have not spoken. And he's like, I hope you have a plan to get Caroline and Stefan into the Salvatore cellar before they cause more damage. And Rick's like, I barely know who you are. Also, I'm human. What exactly are you asking of me? And this is where Enzo's like, my toxic masculinity era begins. Something he's never particularly been, right? Like, Enzo sucks, obviously, but never has he sucked in this specific way. At least as far as I remember.
Well, I guess, I mean...
For someone who's been transplanted from the 50s, right, he's been relatively normal.
That
in
is
terms
true.
of, like...
That is true. He said a few iffy things about Caroline, but beyond that,
Yeah.
I guess he's been behaving pretty well.
Yeah, it's strange that, like, all of a sudden he's now like, you pansy ass. Like, you don't want to stand up and fight because you got a bun in the oven. And it's like, where's any of this coming from?
I guess it's his leftover 50s, because we haven't really seen him interacting with men who aren't Matt, Stefan, and Damon. Matt, who he doesn't care about, Stefan, who he's in love with, and Damon, who he wants to be his best friend sometimes.
Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, he's like, oh, now that you've got a baby on the way, you've become a simpering coward. What will your child think of you? He says, you'll play catch and run from the ball. You'll go fishing and flee from the fish. It's like, what? So he and Rick take up his guns and go hunting for Stefan and Caroline, who are in their no humanity era. They're both like throwing barbs back and forth. It would be fun, like a weird like mutual friends who hate each other dynamic because they're like friends on either side of Damon, right? Rick then asks Enzo why he's trying to save Stefan when he has said to everybody and their mother that he hates Stefan. And Enzo's like, I've got an elaborate revenge scheme that won't matter if Stefan doesn't care about anything.
Oh, I'm sure.
A game's more fun with two players, he says.
Oh, I'm sure.
Which is funny too, because in season 5, he tells Stefan he's more about embracing the leap. Isn't that so much more fun? He's always been like toying around with this idea of this game between him and Stefan. So at least that's consistent. But also...
Enzo is just bored. I think at this point it's not even his jealousy. He's just like, I have nothing else to do because I missed out on half a century of life and society. I don't really have any friends, acquaintances, or even enemies outside of this group of people.
It's like, even an enemy will do. It'll give me something to occupy myself. Rick tells him that if all this is his idea of fun, he needs to take a long, hard look in the mirror. And Enzo's like, what, reevaluate my flippant regard for human life? And Rick's like, no, confront your deep and obvious loneliness.
Well, there it is. Someone in that writer's room was on our side. speaking mostly through Matt, but occasionally through Rick.
Someone took over in the final arc and was looking at this like, how do we pull this together in a way that makes some sort of sense? And it's like, okay, he's lonely and he's lashing out and he's projecting on everybody. It's fine. Thread it together. Let's close this wound up. So Enzo gets all pouty and he says, yeah, okay, I'm a sad nobody up to no good. His words. Nobody said that to him. And he says, what about you, Rick, with your loving partner and your kids on the way and your fulfilling life? Sounds lovely. And Rick smiles and turns away from him. They run into some sort of explosion trap that Stefan has set. Enzo vamp speeds Rick out of it, so that's nice. And then seemingly they leave the rescue attempt at that. Enzo then goes and finds Sarah in the hospital at Whitmore. She was trapped in a sterile situation. She got cut open with no anesthetic. Don't worry about it.
Oh yeah, Liam.
Liam, the icon, the legend of season 6. He tells her that it was a mistake bringing her into his life. So you know what? Right at the end there, a little bit of accountability. And he confesses to her his deep and obvious loneliness. And he says he's lost interest in this game that he's been playing. And then he tells her that she's Sarah Salvatore. A choice! A choice that will ruin her life.
Yep.
Next episode. Oh, this one's also fun. This is another meaty one. All right. So Enzo now he's always dragging people places they do not want to be. He's now dragging Sarah to Chez Salvatore. And he's telling her that once I open that door, you're not going to be my problem anymore. Again, could have just left her to live a life, but whatever.
Why is she your problem now, my guy?
He's just a problem. She's always been his problem. That's been the story. What are you talking about? Always been the case.
He's like, remember in season 1 when I was desperately trying to find you?
When I knew,
Pouring
because
through
my
Salvatore
best friend
records.
Stefan knew. I've been trying to locate you. So she does ask. She says, when did I become your problem? And Enzo says, since your great to the fore Uncle Stefan nearly got you killed. Delusion! Now it's Stefan's fault that this girl nearly died. Enzo's the one who brought her here. God. The door to Chez Salvatore opens. But instead of Damon answering the door, it's Lily Salvatore, my personal queen. Back from a prison world. Go back to the Lily episode. Enzo's eyes are so wide, he very quietly goes, my mistake, wrong house, and then grabs Sarah and runs away. And when Sarah's like, what the hell was that? He says, I met that woman in 1903. She's the one who turned me into a vampire. Ruined my life. It's like, what? It really feels like every arc we're just inventing storylines for Enzo on the fly.
That's why I said he's retconning himself into everything. It is a clumsy rendition of Dawn Summer.
It's so bad. Lily just came back to the real world. Oh, we've got a fresh storyline for Enzo to swim around in and see if it sticks. And it's like, after it runs for 2 or 3 episodes too long, it's like, let's make up a new one so he has something to do.
Enzo is hardly the only character in this universe to get stuff retconned in. That's what you get when you're dealing with immortals who've been alive for decades, for centuries.
Right.
You can just be like, oh, I didn't tell you what I was doing 300 years ago, but me and this other character were totally in the same orbit, so now I can just shove that into the story, whether it fits well or not.
But then it's like, it wouldn't be as egregious because, as you say, it happens for long-lived characters. It happens for characters who are not proximal to the central story, right? Are supporting characters who sometimes just have periods where they have nothing to do. But because they live here, and because they're connected to the main characters, they're a sibling, they're a friend, they're a loved one somehow, it's not weird that they're there, right? And so it's like, if you want Enzo to be here and you're gonna make up all these storylines for him to have always been here, in fact, have one person care about him, because truly no one does. Strangely, Caroline's the only person who's entertained him at like different spots in time, because she's like, I guess, we're aligned in this moment. His best friend still has not spoken to him. We're in episode 18 of the season.
It's hilarious that Damon, who was apparently the reason why Enzo was still here at the start of season 6, Damon comes back from the prison world and immediately his main focus is sort my shit out with Elena, and also Bonnie is now my new best friend.
Yep.
Is there a way to save her?
Enzo, who? Never heard of him. And similarly, Enzo's been so fixated on Stefan and all this drama, he's clearly not reached out to Damon. So what is this thread anymore? Why is he here? So that's the only reason I'm like, it just feels like we're dropping him into every new storyline. But Sarah, of course, freaking out in the car now. They're driving away. And she's like, why do you know my family when even I don't know my family? And so Enzo starts to explain, oh, your uncle Stefan compelled you to forget. This was to keep you a secret from your other uncle Damon after he killed your parents. You would have shared the same fate if it weren't for your other uncle, talking about Stefan again. Sarah's like, oh, so that's who you were taking me to. And he says, actually, no. I was taking you to the one who killed your parents. The good brother recently went bad, and I was hoping to leave you in the care of the bad brother, who's actually less bad now that the good brother is bad. I have a better idea that you could have followed through, Enzo, and it involves leaving this girl alone. But here we are. We then go into a flashback of Enzo's origin, right? Because this whole time, the most we've gotten of his past was Augustine, was Maggie, and even that was in a moment where he literally had to storm into the scene and force people to sit down and listen to his tale at risk of death. Now again, Sarah's trapped in this car with him and has to listen to him regale her as to how he became a vampire in the first place. But it's 1903. He's a Toodlepip orphan in his 20s.
There we go. I was waiting for you to say it.
Can I tell you, I only just found out this week what Toodlepip actually means. It means goodbye. So in the context, it makes no sense. I just knew it was vaguely 19th century English, so it was just fun to say, He's an orphan of 22, he's got his Newsies cap on, and he's got a little bit of tuberculosis. There's a cop who will not let him board a ship that's, I think, heading for the Americas, because he will infect everyone on board with consumption. So, seems valid. He does, though, kick Enzo in the face, which is unnecessary. So, ACAB always... Don't get it twisted. Someone who agrees with that sentiment, ACAB always, snaps the cop's neck and throws him to the ground. And we see Lily Salvatore, dressed like a lady in white. She's got a full white outfit. You're seeing her from an up angle. It's very ethereal. And she takes him up and brings him onto the ship. We cut away from this flashback. We're back with Enzo and Sarah. And he... finally makes a decision to compel Sarah to forget everything that he's told her, ever meeting him or Matt or all the drama that's ensued at this point. Unfortunately for Enzo, Sarah's on Vervain now, thanks to Matt. So she compels her, and then he turns around and she's like, actually no, pulls out an injection and jabs Enzo with Vervain. And she says, you're finally going to tell me everything. She takes him to her little artsy apartment or dorm room. I don't know where she is. And Enzo's like, you're making a mistake. And she's like, yeah, trusting my vampire stalker who arranged for her to be friends with some blue-eyed bartender. Also, she could witness him getting run over by a car so that he can play the hero. And Enzo's like, so you know everything. Cool. Well, enough of that. Let's talk about when I was a naive victim.
I love that she summarized this arc so succinctly.
And when you hear it back, right, it's like, So he's like, back to me, focus on me. Just like we discussed this in the Lily episode again. The doctor on board the ship assesses Enzo's sickness and is like, I can definitely help you. But then when Lily compels him to be honest, he says that, the medicine I give to people with TB is fake. Enzo's going to die within the week. So she sends the doctor off, and then she starts patting down Enzo's face with a little kerchief. And Enzo's like, you should also go so I don't get you infected. And she's like, oh, it's okay. I've already have consumption. And Enzo's like, how did you survive? And she says, I didn't. Then he's like, are you an angel? And she smiles and says nothing. When we cut back later to the flashback, she's dabbing his forehead again and she's humming a little lullaby and he's just coming to consciousness. And he says he hasn't heard the song that she's singing since he was a boy. And he tells Lily that he was abandoned at a workhouse at 4 years old. And Lily, sort of commiserating with him, tells him that she was sent to a sanatorium by her husband to die. So, I get it. And she tells him, oh, I found this new family and everything's been great for me since. And you could join us, outcasts all, and you'll never be alone again. And so just as Enzo is dying of consumption, Lily cuts her hand, feeds him some of her blood, and when he wakes up, he's in transition. He sees a bunch of dead bodies littering this room on the ship. Fully covered in dead bodies. The doctor from earlier comes back and he's like, the woman who helped you killed everyone. She also told me to come find you so that you can feed on me. And he pulls out a scalpel and slits his own throat. And Enzo, immediately overtaken by the bloodlust, leaps forward and starts to drink this guy dry. Back to Sarah in present day. He tells her, I searched for Lily all over the ship and I couldn't find her. She played a game with me and then abandoned me. Then he breaks free and traps Sarah and he waits for the Vervain to leave her system. And she's like, at least leave me with my memories because I don't want any part of my actual family. From what you've told me, I want nothing to do with them. Which, great. Yep. Enzo has achieved alienating Sarah from the only biological family she has left. Woo!
Granted, they are highly dysfunctional, and she is, apart from Stefan's, meddling and generational wealth, she is genuinely better off without these people.
But it's like, now the knowledge is known, Now she knows that the family exists, and she thinks they suck, sans context of all the information.
Yeah.
Because all she has is Enzo's painting of Stefan as this awful dude, and it's like, all the thing about him rescuing her and saving her is gone, right? There's no absorbing that. So, Enzo leaves her with the memories and says, have a good life, Sarah Salvatore, and leaves. What was the point of any of that arc? Couldn't tell you. 10 episodes.
Is this the last we see of Sarah Salvatore until
this is
season
the
8?
last we see of Sarah, because Lily's here now, so he's got a new fixation to hop to.
Gosh. Yeah, what was the point of the Sarah Salvatore arc?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Briefly to show that Damon is even worse than we thought he was in season 5 when he murdered Aaron's ancestors and family members. And then immediately, once Elena has forgiven him for that, we shift to, okay, now she's something for Stefan and Enzo to fight over.
To show that Stefan, his consistency and his generosity and his protection of people and him always being punished for it, I guess, yeah. Nothing to do with Sarah. She comes in and she leaves. And that's it. Enzo, good character, great character. Thematically, narratively relevant. Episode 19, called Because.
That sums up Enzo quite well.
Why? Because. So, Enzo finally faces up to Lily Salvatore. He goes to the Mystic Grill, and she recognizes him, and she's very pleased to see him. And she's like, Lorenzo, I thought I recognized you. And he starts pulling away, seething. And when they sit down and they order some food, he makes it very clear that he's upset, because he's like, you turned me, and then you left me on that ship, strewn with dozens of dead bodies, and like my transition was awful. And Lily's like, oh, I thought my son, whom you're best friends with, would have told you. I've been in a magical prison for about a century. So this is where it turns out that apparently all the acting out, all the causing problems on purpose, and as Rick pointed out earlier, the clear loneliness he has is because he's got some serious abandonment issues, right? One from the time that he was turned, which probably then got redoubled when Damon abandoned him during the whole Augustine arc, even though he wouldn't know it at the time, abandoned by another Salvatore. But actually, the only Salvatore actually abandoned him. And then also from the fact that he was dropped off at an orphanage or a workhouse or whatever at 4. So, there's something there.
Yeah, I see. Fear of abandonment, which is why he can't let go of this group of people who have very little interest in him.
Right. Who have never unabandoned him, right? Who have never been caring of him. So that's also still interesting. But okay.
He's like Peyton Sawyer with her "people always leave"
It's like,
catchphrase.
what are you doing to ensure that the relationships in your life are like worthwhile and are strong? You know, are you forging those strong bonds with loved ones? Or are you kind of in a corner projecting on people and being like, they're going to leave anyway, so I'm not even going to try? No shade to you, Peyton. Lily tells him that she's waiting for Bonnie, who's running a bit late. And Enzo magically somehow figures out that they're trying to steal the Ascendant from her. I don't know how. He doesn't even know what's going on with that plot line, but he's like, no, they're tricking you. So he takes her back to Chez Salvatore and shows her that indeed the Ascendant has been stolen. The Ascendant, by the way, is the tool that they use to get in and out of prison walls. Gemini Coven stuff, go back to Kai, go back to Lily. We talk about it in length. So he tells her this, shows her that, oh yeah, they stole the Ascendant. Bonnie and your traitorous son Damon have tricked you. He's not the most trustworthy. Not 5 seconds after that, when Lily talks about how, oh, the people I'm trying to get out of the prison world with this Ascendant are my family, Enzo scoffs and says, your real family is right here in this house. So, what is it exactly that Enzo's... Like I said, this thing of Enzo constantly playing both sides, right? Because he's like, your sons who are awful and will betray you, but also, why are you looking for some other randos? Your blood family in this house is who you should be focusing on. Which is it and why do you care?
It's his fear of abandonment. He has to play both sides so that he can be sure that if ever one side is upset with me, I can run to the other side of the room and say, I was always in your corner.
Oh, God, this is the thing. This Lepidus-ass type behavior. For those of you who don't know Lepidus, Antony and Cleopatra is a play written by Shakespeare in which, I forget what era of Rome it is, but in that era of Rome, there was a triumvirate of leaders. It was Octavius Caesar, Marcus Antonius, who I'm sure a lot of people know. They call him Antony in that story, hence Antony and Cleopatra. And then, I forget his full name, but he's called Lepidus in the play. And the whole conceit of Lepidus is that in this triumvirate, Marcus Antonius and Octavius Caesar are always at odds in terms of how to run things, and Lepidus is always playing both sides. He's described as a flag in the river, turning whichever way the flow turns him, right? And the takeaway from that play is that nobody likes or trusts Lepidus because he doesn't stand for anything, because he'll tell you whatever you need to hear for you to think he's on your side. If you go to every faction and you try to be friends with all of them, nobody will like you or trust you because it's not trustworthy.
Yeah, unless you're a lot more cunning than Enzo ever is and you can somehow deceive all those people into thinking you are on their side 100% of the time.
Yeah, I guess unless you're Theo Rakin, right? Like, you're not going to pull this off.
Oh no!
Unless you're
Theo
fundamental
Rakin.
genius savant Theo Rakin, the smartest 17-year-old to ever exist, you won't be able to pull this off. Another character who's very Enzo-like, right? They have very similar vibes. Show up in season 5, absolutely annoying. Like, what are you doing here? Later, he comes back to find Lily in the middle of the road at night. She's apparently called him and she's asked him to come and meet him. And he, speaking to her, is like echoing this earlier conversation they had about loyalty. And he says that he was sick in 1903, abandoned by his family. And Lily took him under her wing and rescued him from death. And so in this moment, at least for now, he's asserting that, like, I'm throwing my lot in with you, Lily Salvatore. He does also comfort her after he learns that she's just Ripper the man.
Oh,
who nearly
yes.
hit her with a car, fed uncontrollably and ripped his head off.
And she's like, I fear I lost myself, or whatever she says.
Yep, that's exactly what she says. She's like, automobiles, they're so much more silent than I remember. And it's like, yeah, that makes sense. But also you killed that guy. So, you know. Oh. So yeah, now he's kind of hanging with Lily, who, you know, saved him from death as a young man, was this kind of maternal presence for him in the last hours of his life. So it kind of makes sense. He's found out, oh, she didn't abandon me, she got taken away, so maybe there's something to be built here. So that's nice. Episode 20 is the bachelor party episode. You would think Enzo would not be relevant in that, but he is at the bachelor party. Matt, of course, is like, who invited you? And Enzo says, Damon, which I think is the first indication that they've spoken at all this year. I believe. I have not gone back to scrub through all of season 6, but I believe this is the first indication that they've spoken at all since he's been back. He also gets real confused by a jello shot, which I thought was funny. He takes a drink and then he sees there's something left in it and he tries to shake it out and it doesn't come out. I thought that was good.
So now, Enzo, you've been back for a year. If you'd spent less time up Stefan's ass and more time just utilizing your freedom, you would know how to drink alcohol.
Having fun. Living free. That's how life's supposed to be. Black Eyed Peas said it ages ago. Have you heard Black Eyed Peas? I think you'd like them. He then goes into Stefan's bedroom because of
course he does. To steal Stefan's gym socks or whatever it is he's gonna do now.
And he says, your mother needs your help. And Stefan, of course, is like, what do you know about my mother? But they discuss that off screen because then they cut to Stefan finding Lily about to drink somebody in the street again. And they go and have their ripper-to-ripper conversation. There's a brief conversation between Enzo and Damon in which Damon refers to Enzo as my brother from the same mother. So I thought that was another thing to put a little pin in for later. Enzo also advises Damon about like the cure situation. This is when Damon and Elena takes the cure in this episode, but she's like, take the cure with me. And so Damon's like busy considering that. He then leaves the party because again, what would he be doing here? He goes back to the grill where Stefan has lost track of Lily, but Stefan and Damon finally manage to find her, and then they jab her with Vervain, put her in the Salvatore cellar. It's standard procedure, you know, that's just kind of a revolving door. Enzo is there when Lily comes back to consciousness inside the cell, and that's when Stefan tells him, I've got it from here. It's a family matter. And Enzo's like, she's fragile. She should be with somebody she trusts. And Stefan's like, Enzo, I've got it from here. So Enzo tells Lily, I'll come visit, don't worry. And then he leaves. Penultimate episode. God, it really just kind of like slides down a hill towards the end of the season all times for Enzo. He does come to Chez Salvatore to visit Lily, but at that point she's being guarded by Bonnie while everyone's like preparing for Alaric and Joe's wedding. And Bonnie... This is good. Bonnie asks him if this is like an Oedipus thing going on. It's funny, but unfortunately, a gift from Apollo flung into Bonnie's face. So...
Because really, at this point, you would have been well within your rights to interpret all of this as being Enzo's mommy issues and the irony of Lily being much closer to this surrogate son, we assume, than she is to her biological sons who she emotionally detached herself from when she became a vampire. I wouldn't blame you for thinking that, because we all did.
Because she met Enzo in her vampire era when she had already started making her new family, who, to be fair, at the time, were peers to her, not like children surrogates as we find out in season 7. He would have been sort of like the new ingenue in their group, the little son, the little protege to join up with them.
Yeah, that group dynamic was all flip-floppity between seasons because she's like, oh, I need my family. They keep me grounded.
They keep me stable.
Next season, it's my 6 children.
My 6 children
I'm in charge of them.
Rein in. Who I have to keep from going off the rails. And it's like, oh... We've turned completely 180 on that dynamic, but okay, cool. So yes, Enzo constantly, you've said this before in the Lily episode, Enzo constantly being put on a level with Stefan and Damon, right? Damon's his best friend. Stefan, it's complicated. But like, Lily's up here as a maternal figure. He always references how he was abandoned as a child when he's talking about how she found him. Every time they talk about her rescuing him, he's like, I was orphaned and abandoned. You took me under your wing. You saved me. She's dabbing his forehead and singing a lullaby on that ship. I don't want to get into straight relationships. I don't know if partners like sing lullabies to each other. That's none of my business. But to me, that's a mother-son thing.
It was definitely very matronly. It was giving maternal vibes. I will not be gaslit by you, Julie Plec, because you changed your mind over the summer.
Bonnie does not allow him to visit Lily because at this point, Lily has attacked Bonnie in a ripperfugue and thrown some, again, I still don't know what it was that she threw, but it went through Bonnie's neck and she almost died. So she's like, nobody's gonna get to see her. So Enzo's like, fine, take this MP3, pass it on to her. It's got a bunch of songs from our time back in the day. I think she'll appreciate it. Lily does break out later that day of the cell. It's not super important.
Which is also par for the course with the Salvatore Sella.
Yep. She finds Enzo at the grill and thanks him because she heard that he brought the MP3. She pronounces every syllable of that acronym. And then she ropes him into her new plan to get her prison world family back. We next see them at like a container terminal, some sort of place where these big shipping containers are being kept, where her family is supposed to be, but she can't find them. When we open in the last episode, Enzo is now driving Stefan and Caroline, who he's picked up from the wedding, where Kai has like caused mass destruction and thrown everyone aside, killed Joe, like all the Gemini are dying. So Enzo has driven from where Lily is to the wedding, seen the carnage, scooped up Stefan and Caroline and put them in the car, and is now driving back to Lily and is like, again, your mother needs help. That's his only job in this back half. Then the next morning, because again, you don't see him in the interim, he comes back to find Lily is still at this container terminal. She's just stayed up the whole night trying to find these people. He assures her that she's not a monster for leaving her old life behind and for trying to find this new family. He says he's been searching to be a part of something his whole life too. And finally, they see an enormous building that's been uncloaked because elsewhere, Kai is now officially dead. So I guess he was concentrating on a spell and his concentration got broken to take it to D&D. So inside this building, we see who we know to be the heretics approaching. And Lily very emotionally says, Lorenzo, it's our family. That's how season 6 ends for Enzo. What can be said?
He was there to shine a light on Stefan having given up on Damon, even though Caroline was already doing that.
Even though anybody could have taken up the mantle, even though Stefan had been looking for him and had found nothing.
He was there to, I guess, again, shine a light on the budding Stefan and Caroline romance, even though anybody else could have done that. He was there to be involved in the Sarah Salvatore plot. I won't say anybody could have done what he did, but they could have unfolded that in any other way. Enzo was not pivotal to the reveal of Sarah Salvatore and the life she'd been living as Sarah Nelson.
I think if you asked him, he'd say otherwise.
It was a nice twist, the Lily Salvatore connection. I will say I was interested in that.
Certainly.
However, where it ends up going sours the entire thing for me. So in retrospect, it ends up not being a thing of, because even Damon, toward the end of the season, who is very bitter at his mother, he suddenly starts paying attention to Enzo again because it's, my mother who decided she just didn't care about me and Stefan. I'm far more affected by it than Stefan is, even though Stefan is the mama's boy. But how dare you, Enzo, be closer to her than I feel that we can ever be? This now you're in my crosshairs. Now you're on my radar because this is
not
pissing me
even
off.
just that. Little spoiler for season 7 coming up next session, but you choose to be with Lily and her crazy heretic crew over us, and it truly is like, when did you speak to Enzo? When did you care about Enzo? But then he says something similarly insane, so we'll get to that when we get to that.
And then all of a sudden, the reason for all of that shifts, and I'm like, well, now Damon can't even be jealous because it's not a thing of, you stole my mom and I have mommy issues. Now it's
you're trying to be my stepdad? Yes. Okay, cool. That's gonna be weird.
Which makes the entire... thankfully he didn't know who Lily was the whole time, so that helps. But now I'm like, now this obsession with Stefan and Damon, looking back, I'm like, if you'd had it your way,
Stefan especially is so just put into a weird light now of like, what was all that?
This was him trying to be the father who stepped up. He's like, when I
It's
snapped
all
Stefan's
weird.
girlfriend's neck, it's because I could see he was mistreating Caroline and he wasn't loving his brother deeply enough, and I just took it upon myself as a step parent to discipline him.
I didn't approve. I raised him better than this. I think there were seeds. I think that's the one thing I appreciate about going back. It's something I've said a number of times as we do this podcast of like going back and finding some early stuff that like actually works, right? Right at the beginning, there's some good seeds for Enzo there. And then right just before the end here, all the stuff about like his issues with loneliness and abandonment is like all this stuff is like kind of, there's something glowing in there, right? There's some diamonds in the muck. But there's a lot of muck, unfortunately, is the thing. So it's a shame. There is an alternate versus Damon, because this is the thing I also wanted to know is that, like, do I dislike the Enzo narrative as much as I do the Damon one? No. In fact, I think the Enzo one is far more salvageable, right? We've a number of times within the session sort of talked about what could have been far more interesting in the way they positioned Enzo in the story. If they positioned Enzo at all somewhere in the story, he could have been so much more interesting, right? So
Something that was bouncing around the back of my head that isn't super relevant. I'm like, Enzo continues this pattern we've got since Klaus showed up of characters who insist on being known by like nicknames and shortened versions of their name, which I like it because we see with like Luke and Liv, who are Lucas and Olivia, and Joe, who is Josette, and Kai, who is Malachi, and eventually we get Cade, who is Arcadius. But I'm just like, until season 5 of the Vampire Diaries, I had never heard anyone
Lorenzo
called Enzo
shortened to Enzo.
Enzo. In fact, when I think I was reading the transcript before the episode came out in South Africa, and I saw, oh, there's a new character called Enzo, and I truly thought this was a name from just some culture I was unfamiliar with. I was imagining him as some brown-skinned POC. Because I thought, oh, is this an African name? Is it a Polynesian name? What's going on here? And then I got into it far enough for them to be like, oh no, it's Lorenzo. And I was like, oh, I don't think I would have gotten there on my own.
Listen, I'm not privy to Italian culture. The character within the story seems to be... Actually, and I'll save that for next episode, because it's possible that they do... Because I was going to be like, is he another Tyler situation where you sort of go, okay, racially, I guess you have to assume he's white by default because of the connections that they're being given. His name would suggest he's Italian, right? Italian, English, there's some sort of thing going on over there. Because his first name's Lorenzo, and his second name is St. John. St. John, which I've never heard as a surname. I've always seen it as a name pronounced St. John.
Yeah, I guess. But I know some of the surnames with Saint in them are just pronounced Saint. I guess it depends which part of England or whatever you came from. Like in Glee, we have Jesse St. James.
Yeah. But that would suggest English, British, anglicized, Anglo-Saxon. That's the word I'm trying to say. But later on, it might seem that they're like... I don't know if honoring's the word, but it's like acknowledging the fact of the actors' kind of ethnic connections in the people that they bring in later, which I had never thought about.
That's true.
Mostly because I don't think about Enzo very often, so to be fair.
I was going to say mostly because I don't think about that part of season 7 that often.
That's also fair. It's also
the
very
armor.
fair. But we'll get to that when we get to that. For now, I think that's all we have to say on Lorenzo St. John. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions, queries, or just want to say hi, you can go ahead and mail those to animalattackpod@gmail.com. You can also tweet us at animattackpod. That's at ANIM attack pod. You'll find a link tree in our bio that has all our online stuff. From us, cheers.
Cheers.